So there was definitely some news this week. Man of Tomorrow really was the biggest news of the week, I would say, with respect to the week that was. But a few other things, including me starting a new Patreon show yesterday, among other things. But you know what? Let's just dive headfirst into this week's feedback. And of course, lead things off with John R., who actually sent a couple of emails this week, but this first one, it was just one that he said he had to share. And it's a Facebook post. It's a video. It's a clip from Rocco's Modern Life. And I didn't watch Rocco that much, so I don't remember what episode this came from. But he's walking in what looks like a bookstore, and he's walking past a pair of individuals. I think one is an elephant, and the other, I don't know what this is, a cow or something or whatever. But he's holding a magazine called Elf Life, and he's wearing a shirt that literally just says fanboy, and he's got a hat that says I love elves, and he talks about how you'll never be satisfied with a mortal woman again because the elf wenches are so beautiful that you'll spend the rest of your life looking for the same beauty again. And the elephant who's wearing a shirt called the Nuclear Swan says, "Wow, you're an idiot." And the caption of this is, it's the 90s and this show predicting internet social media comments. Yeah, pretty much. Yep, that's pretty accurate, unironically in that regard. But, go back and watch some of those old Nicktoons. It's not just The Simpsons that predicts how everything went and how things went down with society. It's also old animation in general. But here, let's get to John's second email, which is called Suggestion for Work. Interesting. Okay. So we're getting into some real life stuff. John has been talking about a lot of real life stuff lately. And so let's see what this is. It sounds like he has a suggestion for me. Number one, he says, I'm growing concerned that you might suffer burnout working Monday through Friday, plus a 2-hour total commute and deciding not to take holidays off. It's great that you drive there when there's no traffic, but how do you find the time to do the things you want to do? Go to the gym, watch a show or movie? Would you ever consider sleeping over at a friend's or acquaintances nearby the TV station? No. Maybe a staycation at a hotel? No. Yeah, you're spending money on a hotel, he says, but you could perhaps use some rapid rewards. Do it on a Thursday. You get to the hotel and they can't check you in early. See if you can use their amenities like a pool, hot tub, or a gym before your room is ready. Get some rest in the room, catch up on some shows. I know being away from your fiancé for one day might suck, but I am growing concerned about your well-being. I discovered an old friend is working 7 days a week with no days off, and I'm concerned how that's affecting his long-term health. He says, I'm not saying do this every Thursday, but if you're working 4 weekdays a month without any slowdown, a nice change of pace might be good for your well-being if you did it maybe once every 2 months. In Dragon Ball, there's a philosophy, he says, from the great master Roshi: eat well, train well, rest well, live well. Shonda would understand if you needed to do this. If you agree to do this, I'll be your flight officer for 1 year. I'm sure you can handle keeping this up. I'm not saying you can't, but you're not Superman. You're a regular human being with sleep deprivation. I don't want to find out on day one day on Threads that you fell asleep at the wheel. All right, let's slow down here. Okay, so John, first of all, I do want to say thank you. I appreciate the concern for my well-being. It is touching in that regard. And while I am tempted to take you up on your offer to be a flight officer on Patreon for a year, I can't in good conscience do it this way. First off, I don't know that would add up to how much it would cost me to rent a hotel or to stay in a hotel for at least one night every week. Second, it's difficult to explain this, but living in Michigan, I know that the commute is far away and it's not forever, right? Because here's the thing, our situations in life, and something that you learn as you get older, is that you're not locked into any particular situation, work or otherwise, forever. Even in the climate that we're in now, and they just sent out another jobs report that said that we now have less jobs available in the United States than there are unemployed individuals, and that's the first time that's happened since the last time the current president was president, right? Oddly enough, in the 4 years he wasn't president, that wasn't the case. But either way, not to get too political with that. But even in a climate like this, you still have to be able to do what you're going to do. And, life still goes on, and there are still, messages and information from the universe that you shouldn't ignore and directions that you should take in your life for what you actually want to do. And for me, I am doing my best not to ignore those and to understand them and accept them as they happen, right? And for me, I know that the job that I currently work now and the commute that I currently have will not be forever. I know that. I know for certain that will not be forever because things change. I never expected to necessarily have this particular job that I had, but an opportunity arose, and it was something that I did need at that point in my life. But now it's time, definitely to always evolve. And people are always consistently evolving in that regard. And all I can tell you is that drive that I've made now consistently for over 2 years is just something that I'm used to. I have several different ways to do it. I've already got contingencies in place to make certain that I don't fall asleep at the wheel. I will put it that way. They don't involve staying over to anybody's place. I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to do that. With respect to, I'm not going to be an inconvenience to somebody else, and I'm also not going to, add hotel to expenses. I mean, expenses are already like tight enough as it is, right? Think of the cost of living in the United States as it continues to, not be favorable to those of us living in the United States. So, I thank you for the concern, definitely, and I get it. You aren't telling me anything necessarily that others haven't already told me, but I have coworkers that make a further commute. In fact, I have one coworker that lives 30 to 45 minutes north of me, and he makes that drive every day. And he has a house, so he's not moving like anytime soon. At least from our perspective, we live in an apartment, and we can talk about relocation at some point. We've talked about it for the last year or so, just some things didn't line up the way that we wanted it to. But either way, yeah, this will not be a forever situation. It will not be a permanent situation. And believe me, I've done my diligence as far as trying to figure out balance of time and how to do this and how to do that. And yeah, I'm not going to say it isn't more precarious now than it should be, but I also do not believe that it will remain this way forever, because it won't remain this way forever, because I won't allow it to remain this way forever, to be honest with you. So as much as I would appreciate you being a flight officer for a year, I cannot in good conscience accept it this way. So I will have to respectfully decline that particular offer. Besides, it should be about the content, right? You should be a flight officer if you enjoy hearing my dulcet tones talk about extra stuff, whether it's what I talked about yesterday on my new show, Saturday Soliloquy, about how I lay out my case for why the Suicide Squad is a DCU movie instead of a DCEU movie, or my rants, on Sun Just Don't, or anything that I talk about on Friday Flight or on Flight Speed. Either way, and Flight Speed, I should also point out, is also another one of my methods, because that's when I'm in the car, and I'm obviously brain is going a mile a minute. I'm thinking about things that I'm talking about while I'm in the car, so that is one of my mechanisms, if you will, to be honest with you. But yeah, no, it's a tight time constraint, but I'm willing to sacrifice in the interim for future goals. That's the best way that I could put it, to be honest with you. So I will leave it at that. But again, thank you for the concern. I do appreciate that. Seriously, I do. All right, on to your second question. You said, I do agree with a lot of what you said last week. I got taken advantage of a lot until my 20s. These days, I'm not taking crap from people. I had this one friend, calling him Mac, who moved into my apartment without my consent, and even when I eventually did, it was reluctant consent. When he eventually did, I guess you said reluctant consent eventually. I'm not sure how that was worded. He says he mooched off me for 3 months back in 2011, didn't pay any rent or bills, used my dial-up internet, and I had no internet, just cable, and this was all happening inside a studio apartment. The night before this was about to be put to an end. I told him to start paying rent. He replied, nah, waste of money. I gave him an ultimatum and he brushed it off. I didn't squeal, but word got out what he was doing as my caseworker found out and forced him out. He hated me for it, and we stopped talking for months. Months? That's it? He says we did try to reconcile briefly, but when he demanded I do favors for him when I was grieving Donnie, I told him that I'm done spoiling him. He said something anti-Semitic, and I ended the friendship right then and there, and the last I heard, he's living in a tent near a university or something. Wow. Yeah, I don't know why, again, a situation like that, reconciliation would not have occurred. Like there would not have been any like trying to like that part where you said we stopped talking for months. No, that would have been the part where it's like my sentence would have said he hated me for it, and that's the last I've spoken to him, and I couldn't care less what has happened to him. Oh, he's living in a tent near a university or something. Well, it seems like he hasn't learned his lesson. It seems like he's still stuck in whatever situation he's in, and he's no longer a toxic leech for you. So I'm gonna say you came out better on that one in that regard. I mean, man, yeah, that's can't let yourself get pushed over like that. Definitely. So, glad that you are in a position now where you're not taking any shit from anybody, because you really shouldn't. Nobody should at any point in their life, to be honest with you. But it takes us, some of us longer, a lot of us longer, to learn that lesson than many others. So, all right. Question 3 from this other email, from this first email, really. He says, who is your dream team from fiction? Pick 4 fictional characters to lead a team for. Who are those characters? Mine, Superman, Son Goku, Dr. Manhattan, and Scarlet Witch. Okay, let's see. 4 fictional characters to lead a team for. All right. I will go with Batman. I will go with Neo from The Matrix. That's a good pick. Let's see. Another character to lead a team. I mean, they don't all have to be superpowered, right? No, not necessarily. I will say Spider-Man, and then I will round that out with Luke Skywalker. Yep, that's my 4. So, Batman, Neo, Spider-Man, and Luke Skywalker. That is my 4. Why did I not pick any Star Trek characters? Because Star Trek is an ensemble series, and all of them necessarily are not like... They're better as a group, they're better as a crew than they are on their own. Whereas the 4 characters I just picked are pretty good on their own and in teams in that regard. So, needless to say, that's my rationale with respect to that. All right, 4th question here for this first email. He says, all this Bible talk from last week made me curious. What would you do if Jesus randomly came to your house? I'd probably invite him in and we'd just talk. Apparently in the 60s, Paul McCartney had a guy come visit Abbey Road claiming to be Jesus. Paul didn't want to miss a chance of this actually being Jesus and just went along with it different times. I'd probably do the same thing. I mean, because what am I going to do? Like, I'm not going to, bow to him and do whatever. I'm going to treat him like a normal person. Like a regular friendly individual, right? I would be someone that would just want to, have a conversation and shoot the shit with him truthfully. And that's actually a question that I've pondered back in the day, back in my traditional undergrad days. I remember there was one of my English classes, I had told that to a teacher, an English professor, and he wrote something up for it, like this first-person narrative about having a conversation with Jesus based off of me giving him that idea. And yeah, it would pretty much be the same. I would just, invite him in and have a conversation, hey, you want to have a bite to eat or whatever, that type of thing, just being a good neighbor, if you will. I feel like that's the best thing you could do with Jesus. Right, because he doesn't necessarily want you worshiping him. I think about the Temple of Doom, not Temple of Doom, pardon me, Last Crusade, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I think about the Grail scene, right, and how Donovan was such a hedonistic, avarice-driven idiot that he thought that the cup that gave everlasting life to Jesus Christ was a golden chalice, and of course both he and Elsa thought that, and of course he chose poorly. And Indiana Jones obviously picked the one that was not adorned with any gold or any jewels or whatnot. It was just a basic carved cup, and he said that's the cup of a carpenter, and he chose wisely, right? So Jesus would be extremely working class. And brown, I might add. So he'd be more than welcome in my home for a number of reasons. So, yeah, that's what I'd say. And I'd also, I'd shelter him because it's like, yeah, you got to watch for cops and, ICE and whatnot out there. Because, yeah, they wouldn't miss an opportunity to arrest or deport Jesus when they could. They most certainly would, especially when they found out he didn't look the way that they thought he did. Hey, we're getting a little social political here. It is what it is. You asked the question. I wanted to answer it honestly. So let's get to your second email, which is titled Flight Chat. The night is darkest just before the dawn, and I promise you the dawn is coming. All right. Little Harvey Dent, Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent from The Dark Knight. The Gemini summary, there wasn't one automatically for the first email, but this one says, Jonathan R. asked for opinions on potential character arcs for Clayface and a possible team-up between Superman and Lex Luthor. He also suggested incorporating listener sports questions into Flight Chat and asked about the worst loss of a prized possession. Oh, all right. So let's get to it. He says, first of all, so let's talk about Man of Tomorrow and Clayface for a minute, the seemingly third and fourth movies of the DCU. I actually watched the Feet of Clay episodes for the first time in God knows how long. I like that they made Hagen a Shakespearean tragedy, but by the end they established him for who he is. So that begs the question of, I'm guessing you meant to say whether or not, so that begs the question of whether or not Clayface can break the mold. Are they going to make him a sympathetic villain like Joker and Sony Spider-Man Universe films, or do they go the Penguin route and make it clear as day that he's evil? He can become a villain, but one where he's lost his mind. He says, imagine a scene like this for a moment that can work one of two ways. The first time he becomes made of clay, or the last scene of the movie is Hagen accepts he can't change what he's become and becomes a puddle flowing with the current into the Gotham sewers. It's a very effective scene if they ever do something like this. Perhaps the next time we see him, he's accepted that the Hagen part of him is gone. The only problem is if this is an origin story, do we know if this would take place before or after Creature Commandos? I suppose the easiest way to get around it is the Clayface we saw may have been Basil Karlo or a new version of the character, because we know this is the Matt Hagen version. What do you think about the possibility of something like this happening? Well, before getting into the rest of this first question, because he does have a scenario for Man of Tomorrow, but I think that if they stick to Feet of Clay as their inspiration, I think that pretty much tells the story itself. And of course, for people who don't know or forgot how Feet of Clay goes, Matt Hagen was an out-of-work actor who had been disfigured in an accident. And basically, Roland Daggett appealed to his weakness, if you will, like his dependency, and gave him the Renew You cream as a way to, hey, you can get your acting roles back, you can get your normality back, but it's temporary. And I'll give you as much of it as you do things for me, right? So that means framing Bruce Wayne and, doing my bidding as I, continue to try and grab Gotham, corporately in this regard, right? And that was his mistake, was impersonating Bruce Wayne, because then that puts Batman square, you are square in his crosshairs. And that was ultimately his downfall, was if he had just not impersonated Bruce Wayne, then it would have taken a lot longer for Batman to, deal with him. But because Bruce Wayne was put at risk, Batman had to deal with it as efficiently and as brutally and as intimidatingly as he did. My two favorite Batman interrogations are in that episode, or in that two-parter. The first one where he's interrogating Raymond Bell by skipping him on the water hanging from the Batwing, and he's like, listen up, scumwad, because I'm only going to ask this once. Who was Lucius Fox meeting at the dock? And Bell is like, Wayne, Bruce Wayne, you lying sleaze. You want to rethink that answer? And he scares this dude so badly that he faints. I love that. And then the second one is when he's interrogating Germs, one of Daggett's other associates, in the specimens ward of the hospital. He's like, the man impersonating Bruce Wayne. I want his name. I don't know. And he grabs this random jar and he's like, Crimson Fever, lousy way to go. No cure, The name, now. And he puts the jar on the shelf next to him. And the dude's like, okay, it was Hagen, Matt Hagen, the movie actor. And he hits the wall and it shakes the shelf so that the jar starts rattling closer to him. And he's like, it's the truth, I swear. Then how did he fool Fox? He's good, but no actor, no makeup is that good. I don't know. And he hits the wall again and he's like, you're crazy. Last chance. Talk. All right. And those are my two favorite Batman interrogation scenes. But throughout the story of Feet of Clay, Hagen is somebody that he's not all bad, but he's also not all good, because he's willing to commit crimes just so that he can get the Renew You, right? And it's not just drug addiction. It's not just drug dependency. It's that he made the choice willingly to be a criminal just so that he could feel normal again. And that drove him, the addiction drove him to seek more of it out and lean more into being a criminal. And then that's when they tried to take him out by, drowning him in the Renew You stuff. And that's what turned him into Clayface. And at that point, he was all about revenge. He wanted vengeance on Daggett, for what he had become. And that was, so it was a case where Hagen was already not that great. And this just pushed him over the edge. And I think that works perfectly. I think that would be a great way. Feet of Clay really just take out all the Batman stuff. Or, maybe make the Batman stuff, like the Batman part of it, like from afar, if you will, and just focus it on Hagen. If they do it like Clay, if they do it exactly like Feet of Clay, I think that's a perfect blueprint. I really do. And maybe, it depends on what Flanagan's script is, how much inspiration he did take from it. But yeah, I think that works perfectly in that regard, to be honest with you. So that would be my answer with respect to that. All right, on to his thoughts on Man of Tomorrow. He says, this must be a temporary alliance Supes has with Lex, as I don't see them being friends, as is implied with the Jim Lee image of Clark holding a screwdriver next to an armored Lex, unless there was a big threat coming to Earth. Maybe it's Brainiac. I don't think they're going back to the Zodwell anytime soon. Maybe it's Mongol, or someone who's a cosmic threat and can conquer Earth. I recommend watching Superman Brainiac Attack animated film. It could very well be a key inspiration for the next film in this saga. More than likely, the inspiration is comic-driven, and so I guess it would depend on what comic Superman Brainiac Attack comes from in that regard. But John says, who could be such a threat that Superman and Lex team up despite everything that's happened before? He killed an innocent man, he kidnapped Crypto, he's tried killing Superman. I mean, I know Ocean Master Orm did horrid things too and had a bit of redemption, but I don't think that's going to happen. If Brainiac is in this, he's going to fuse with Luthor to become Lexiac. I don't have any frame of reference for that, but I think that, this is part of why I don't like speculating, because invariably, whatever scenario you come up with is not going to be what James Gunn does. Even if it is Brainiac, it's not going to go the way you're saying it is. And you're saying that you don't see them being friends as implied. Well, Jim Lee drew that image for a reason. So I have to believe that he, being the CCO, knows something, right? And truthfully, between, like all three of those images, right? There's Jim Lee's image, where he's holding the screwdriver next to Lex. And then there's Mitch Garrett's image where they're fighting each other. And then there's my favorite of the three, Jorge Jimenez's image, where they look like they're like about to fight someone, where they are both like teamed up. And to me, that could be the progression of images. All three of those could be emblematic of exactly what we see. And what I'm thinking with Man of Tomorrow is it might even be a similar vibe to what we saw with X2. If you remember the X-Men 2 film, that was a case where after clearly Magneto and the Brotherhood were at odds with the X-Men in the first film, they had to come together to deal with Stryker in the second film. And granted, by the time the movie was over, Magneto had his own nefarious intentions, and the Brotherhood went back to being the Brotherhood, but it was a temporary alliance to take care of what was a bigger threat to mutants in that film. And I think that most certainly could happen. And Brainiac absolutely could be that more significant threat that that threatens all of Earth, that, Lex has no choice. But, Superman can't fully trust him because he's going to try and get some upper hand and try and control Brainiac or do something later on, right? Maybe that's how the Lexiac thing happens. But the idea of them teaming up, reluctantly, I think is entirely possible and maybe even obvious based on the imagery that we were shown, the images that the DC artists all drew for this announcement, right? I think that's kind of obvious, to be honest with you, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, clearly Lex is returning. Nicholas Hoult even confirmed this, on social media with respect to that. So I think he said he was getting his razor ready, because obviously he's grown his hair back since, but he will, be more than willing to shave it again to play Lex, who, will probably start the movie in Belle Reve, more than likely, and we'll see how things shake up between now and then with respect to that. But either way, we'll find out soon enough. Before we know it, July 9th, 2027 will be here, and we'll have plenty of speculation and plenty of other tidbits of information to inform us exactly how that second chapter of the Superman saga is going to go. All right, second question for the second email. He says, my advice for sports discussions is this. Instead of doing an entire show dedicated to it, encourage the listeners to just send flight chat questions that include sports. Here's the question for you. Do you like to watch the U.S. Open tennis tournaments? I know they're on this week, but I just haven't had much time to watch it. I haven't watched it myself, but I've kept up. I mean, obviously, at my job, I see, the results are like, okay, so-and-so happened in this match, or this happened. Like, I found out about the thing that happened. I found out about Coco Gauff losing the other day, like a week or so ago. And I also found out about that other situation between the black tennis player, the woman, the female, and the one, I don't think she's from Russia, but she's from somewhere in Europe, and the cultural insensitivity and whatnot. I did hear about that, and I did see that happen. With like I saw the replay of that, but no, I can't say that I watch U.S. Open quite like that. And I hear what you're saying in terms of like, just only keeping it listener feedback. The thing is like I like talking sports. I really do like talking sports. And like there is part of me that would like to just do a sports show so that I can at the very least talk sports. If I rely on only feedback, then a lot of times I probably won't get to talk sports because there's really only one or two of you. And really right now the only one I can think of is Alex, that has consistently sent me any sports questions. And maybe he sent one in his email today. We'll find out here in a little while. The only other person that I can remember that has directly asked me about sports, with respect to my thoughts on teams and whatnot, I remember Travis Hines. He sent me, because he's a hockey fan, and I'm a hockey fan. It's been a long time since I've talked to him. And I don't think it was on Threads either. I think it was on BLUESKY, if I'm not mistaken. But, yeah, I don't know, because I really like talking sports. And with how just absolutely ridiculous and depraved like sports talk radio and whatnot is, I kind of personally, as a content creator, would like an outlet to get my sports thoughts across without having to rely on morons on the radio and whatnot, just saying whatever for shock value and to get a rise out of people, for ratings and whatnot. Same as, bloggers and fanboys do with clickbait on social media. It's funny because a number of them are like, I don't do social media. I don't go into that toxicity. And it's like, no, you just promote your own toxicity over the radio, right? You're no different. You really aren't. But it's funny to hear them say that, especially older ones or ones that are my age, to act like they're above the social media fray when in reality they're just acting like trolls on the radio. They're just radio trolls instead of social media trolls. So the lack of self-awareness is hilarious and ironic in that particular regard. All right, on to the third and final question from John this week. He asks, what's the worst loss you ever had to endure when it came to losing a prized possession? I would have to say losing my phone in SG because it contained the last photos I had of my grandpa that I had yet to upload. Boy, let's see. As far as losing a prized possession, I don't know. Like there isn't one necessarily that stands out to me, truthfully. It certainly wouldn't be a phone because I've had so many of those over the years. And, as far as media, like books or even Blu-rays, like steelbooks and whatnot, I've been able to replace ones that I've lost for whatever reason in that regard, right? And there's other things that, probably like models and other like trinkets and whatnot that if I lost them, like, yeah, I don't think I really, like, obviously I've experienced the loss of, like physical trinkets and prized possessions, but none that has been like so enduring that I just can't forget about it even to this day. Like I have not reached that yet, and I don't, knock on wood, I don't necessarily want to reach that point. I imagine a prized possession at some point I will lose, for whatever reason that will, be very difficult to deal with. But, I haven't, at least not that I can remember, I haven't reached a point like that yet in that regard. So that would be my answer to that. Sorry, I don't really have a definitive answer with respect to that particular situation. But either way, if anybody else has any prized possessions, like if you have like even in comics, like I mentioned before that, I was given Cosmic Odyssey as a graphic novel for my birthday as a kid many, many years ago. And, I also had Superman Funeral for a Friend and Batman Sword of Azrael. I think the Sword of Azrael was the one that I read the least. So I believe I still have that book around here somewhere. But World Without a Superman and World Without a Superman / Funeral for a Friend and also Cosmic Odyssey, the spines got damaged and, they were worn down and the pages were lost. There was another comic book, The Best of Star Trek. I think I mentioned this, a bunch of DC Comics Star Trek collection by Mike W. Barr. That was also damaged and destroyed when I was a kid. Just because, not that I was just wantonly destructive with them, just I read them a lot. I read them a ton. And I've replaced at least one of them. I've replaced Cosmic Odyssey. I went to Vault at Midnight down a comic shop in this area down in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I replaced that. So I got another copy of that. And then there, with respect to World Without a Superman, Funeral for a Friend, either I will replace it, or it's one that Scott sent to me because when he upgraded a bunch of his comic collections, he sent me a bunch of old graphic novels and whatnot that I have like boxes of them here that I still haven't like dug into and like read through, and probably won't until I get a home, like a house, if you will. But either way, either Funeral for a Friend, World Without a Superman is in there, or I can replace it later at some point. And The Best of Star Trek by Mike W. Barr, last I checked, like I haven't replaced that yet. The last I checked, I believe it is available on Amazon. Let's see, is it still available on Amazon? Yep, absolutely. The Best of Star Trek by Mike W. Barr, which apparently was published. Well, this says it was published January 1st, 2001. That's clearly a new version, because I had like a newer printing, because I had an older printing well before that. A compilation of the best stories starring the crew of the Enterprise features such adventures as the final voyage of the 5-year mission, the secret of Scotty's first love, and the trial of Captain Kirk original. Yeah, and I remember all those stories, like, I mean, perfectly, because I read that book so many times. It's all the stories in them. And there's some other stories in there that they don't mention that I really like. And yeah, at some point I would like to replace that book, and I will, because this place clearly has it in stock, and it can be found in that regard. But yeah, so nothing quite yet that I have lost that has been irreplaceable in that regard, thankfully, and I hope to never have to deal with that. But either way, we'll see how it goes, because at the end of the day, we also have to remember that it is just prized possessions. It is just physical items in that regard, and the whole that old expression, you can't take it with you, so you got to have perspective on that as well going forward. But that is it for John's emails this week. Thank you as always, John, for your feedback. Greatly appreciated. And again, thank you for the concern with respect to my well-being. I do legitimately appreciate it. All right, let's shift gears a bit and go to some Facebook feedback. This was a message sent a couple of days ago from Daryl Taylor, who has messaged before on Facebook. Hello, Daryl. Welcome to the feedback circle. He sent this a couple of days ago. He said, "Hey, love your YouTube channel. Keep up the amazing work." Thank you, Daryl. Appreciate that. He says, "What's your opinion on James Gunn announcing Superman Man of Tomorrow for 2027? And what did you think of the trailer for Marvel Zombies? People are saying that it's not going to be a part of the larger MCU, and of course they are comparing it to the original comics by Robert Kirkman, and you got some are upset over the fact that the first time we will see Blade will be in animated form because the character will be in that series as a version of Moon Knight, and some are mad over the fact that we will see the character in animated form instead of live action, and still think that Mahershala Ali Blade will most likely show up in Avengers Secret War or in Doctor Strange 3 before getting his own film first. But anyway, keep up the great work and be blessed." Thank you, Daryl. Appreciate that. So there's a few things to unpack. This is a Marvel question indeed. A couple of Marvel questions in there. First off, with respect to, well, I guess you started with DC. So you start off, my thoughts of the Man of Tomorrow announcement. I did an episode the day that you sent this email. I did an episode of Flight Alert talking about it. And, I go more in depth, but I think it's awesome. I think it's brilliant. I think that Superman fans, it's your time to, sit in the sun like Batman fans have for decades and enjoy this 1000%. I think it's great news. I think there is nothing negative with respect to them announcing Superman Man of Tomorrow. And I think anybody that tries to paint it as a negative is taking a huge amount of copium because they're still upset that the DCEU is dead. And I can say, as a fan of the DCEU, as a fan of the Snyderverse, the DCEU is dead. And I have moved on, and I fully embrace the DCU because I like being happy and not a miserable misanthrope. So that's as much as I have to say about that. As far as the Marvel zombie stuff, here, I'll go straight to the wiki. I have seen this trailer, and I suspect, I think Jared, he sent an email in about this, and we're going to talk about this later, and maybe some of the others have as well. But here, I'm going to go straight to the wiki for this because, there's a lot of the inside baseball with Marvel Studios that I'm not privy to. This was one of those things that I'd heard about but didn't really, wasn't aware of, not necessarily. And it says, Marvel Zombies is an upcoming American adult animated television miniseries created by Brian Andrews and Zeb Wells for the streaming service Disney+, based on the Marvel Comics series of the same name. It is intended to be the 16th television series in the Marvel Cinematic Universe from Marvel Studios and is produced by Marvel Studios Animation. The series is set in the alternate timeline introduced in the What If Zombies episode of the animated series What If. Continuing from that episode, Marvel Zombies follows a group of survivors as they risk their lives fighting superpowered zombies to save the world. Andrews served as showrunner and director, with Wells as head writer. The series features an ensemble cast including Awkwafina, David Harbour, Simu Liu, Elizabeth Olsen, Randall Park, Florence Pugh, Paul Rudd, Wyatt Russell, Haley Steinfeld, Tessa Thompson, Dominique Thorne, and Aman Vellani reprising their roles from previous MCU media alongside Todd Williams. Marvel Studios was developing several animated series in addition to What If by June 2021, including a spin-off based on What If Zombies, which was announced in November. Wells and Andrews were both involved by then. The series features the same animation style as What If, with Stellar Creative Lab returning from that series to provide the animation. It will be Marvel Studios' animation first series to be rated TVMA. It's scheduled to be released on Disney Plus on September 24th, 2025, and will consist of 4 episodes. It will be part of Phase 6 of the MCU. So right there, David, there's your answer. With respect to it being part of the larger picture, it says canon as What If. Like, literally, it says canon as What If because it's a spin-off of What If. And What If is considered part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is it not? Like, whether it's animated or not, like, it's part of the TV series, spectrum in the MCU. So that's how it's connected, and that's how it's part of the larger whole, right? So I feel like, when people kvetch over, that, and I didn't see anything. I didn't list off Mahershala Ali, did I? But apparently, what it says, he is definitively going to be in it as Blade, and part of the what did you say it was? As far as him being seen in animated form, because the character will be in that series as a version of Moon Knight. Oh, okay, I see. Gotcha. But either way, I mean, it says canon as anything in the MCU would be considered canon, and if it's officially listed as part of Phase 6, and if it's officially a spinoff of the What If series, which is considered part of the MCU, then so be it, right? When I talk about things that I need to catch up on with the MCU, What If is part of that. I do need to watch What If. I would like to see What If in that regard. Like, I got to see that. I got to see Agatha all along. And now, quite honestly, this gives me an impetus to maybe move What If up on the list, and see if I can get that watched. I mean, we'll see. That's a binge effort that would take, like a whole weekend perhaps. But maybe I'll have some time to be able to get caught up on What If in time for the premiere of Marvel Zombies on September 24th. That'd be cool. But yeah, I have no issues with it. I feel like with respect to, the animation looks awesome. Because I haven't seen What If, the first thing that I thought of was it looks like a more 3D version of the animation from X-Men 97, because it does look very similar. In fact, in terms of the character designs and whatnot, it does look very similar. And that animation was gorgeous and fantastic. And I imagine it's all related. It's all like similar in that regard, right? But yeah, it looks awesome. They're using MCU actors. What does it matter if it's animated? Like, I'm tired of this, and I'm not saying you, Daryl, not at all, but, like, I'm tired of this separation that fans automatically place between animation and live action. Even when the universes tell you, hey, this is the animated equivalent of live action, it's like that's not good enough for them, because they have to see it in live action. It has to be real for them. Even though none of it's real, it's all fictional. And it's such bullshit gatekeeping, as far as I'm concerned. So, to me, I have no issues with it being animated. And if that is the first time that we see Mahershala Ali's Blade in the MCU is animated, so effing what? At least you see him. At least he exists in some form. That's more than we can say in terms of live action. Why are we upset about that? I personally am not upset about that, because to me, I understand what happens with development hell and how Marvel Studios, things haven't been entirely rosy and perfect for them lately in the last couple of years since the end of the Infinity Saga. Are they going to have a strong year next year with Avengers Doomsday and Spider-Man Brand New Day? We think so. Historically speaking, that seems to be the case. But who knows? But either way, I don't have an issue with this whatsoever. And this looks cool. This gives me, like, impetus to get caught up on What If. And to get caught up, like, on the animated portions of the MCU in preparation for this, right? I did that for X-Men 97. I binged through, I had never watched X-Men the Animated Series. I binged through all 3 full seasons of X-Men the Animated Series in preparation for X-Men 97, because when I watched 97, I wanted full context. I wanted to be able to understand and I'm so glad I did that. I am really, really glad I did that, because there are definitely things and emotional beats and really, like, one gut-wrenching moment in the middle of the show that would have been lost on me, and I would not have felt anything had I not binged X-Men the Animated Series beforehand. I am very glad that I did that. And I don't know, I'm not saying that'll be the exact same case here with Marvel Zombies, but it does give me inclination to do so. So that's definitely food for thought on my end. But the trailer looks awesome. I think that, again, it's as canon in the MCU phases as What If is. So, you know what? Hey, it's all good in the hood for me. Seriously, I'm good with it. You know, bring it on. Let's roll. I've had a good year with the MCU. I've had a really good year with the MCU. I thought Captain America: Brave New World was decent, right? You know, it's a good mid tier. Wasn't low tier. Certainly, I would watch it over Thor: Love and Thunder and Guardians Volume 2 without question, and many others as well. I thoroughly enjoyed Thunderbolts. I thought that was top tier MCU, and I thought Fantastic Four: First Steps was top tier MCU. And when Marvel finally deigns to give us a damn pre-order link for that 4K Steelbook, I'll have it so that I can maintain my library of having MCU films in 4K Steelbook form. But either way, I'm just saying, I don't have a whole lot of massive expectations or gatekeeping to deal with, Daryl, with respect to any of these characters. You know that, I'm sure, if you've listened to the show as much as it sounds like you have. So yeah, I'm good with it, man. Hey, bring on Marvel Zombies. I'll check it out. If I can get What If watched in time, I'll definitely check it out and see what I think about it, because it looks cool. It looks awesome. I like that it's rated TVMA. Yeah, let's go. Let's go, Marvel. Let's go ahead and branch out there, right? It's for Disney Plus. You've got the parental. A couple years ago, you put the parental controls on the app. It's no more about this all kiddie stuff. No, go ahead. Go right ahead. So yeah, I think it looks great. Looking forward to it, to be honest with you. It'd be a nice Marvel project in this little gap in between, the next comic book films that we have that won't be showing up until next year in that regard. So yeah, thank you for that feedback, Daryl. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the channel. Thank you for supporting the channel. Greatly appreciate it, good sir. Looking forward to more of your feedback going forward. All right, back to some DCU hype. Let's check in with our resident Superman superfan, Waliyu Mustafa, because he definitely, I'd have been a little disappointed if he hadn't sent an email this particular week. And of course, this one is titled, All Aboard the DCU Hype Train, Whoop Whoop. Yes, indeed. The summary says, Waliyu shared his excitement. Oh, excitement? He's excited for the new DCU Superman movie? Just a little bit, indeed. And discussed various related topics, he says. Or it says, rather. It says, Waliyu also shared personal updates about movies, TV shows, his cat, Troy, and his daughter, Estelle, starting nursery. All right, fair enough. Well, let's get into it. Waliyu says, hey, Ray, long-time listener. No, wait, that's not right. Haha. But you have technically been a long-time listener, right, Waliyu? Yes, indeed. He says, how are things? I hope Shonda is doing well. Things are all right. Little tense at the moment. I'll talk about that later, though, because there's some stuff going on. I don't want to say tense in a bad way. Just it's going to be a busy weekend for me upcoming. Busy week, busy rest of the week. And I promise that after it's all said and done, I will regale everyone with what happened. But it should be a whole lot of fun. It should be a great time had by all, is what I will say. But he says, I see James Gunn has gone and announced a new Superman movie. That came out of nowhere, kind of. I mean, he was kind of hinting at it, but yeah, didn't think he was necessarily going to announce it this soon. And it's certainly not the time that he did, yes. That did catch us off guard. He said, that came out of nowhere, but very welcoming indeed. Definitely count me in as being excited for it. That being said, I noticed how no one has complained about the release date. Remember when BVS was announced at San Diego Comic-Con in 2013? Many people were up in arms saying it's too soon for a Batman-Superman movie, or DC is just playing catch-up to Marvel. In the end, BVS was released nearly 3 years after Man of Steel, yet Man of Tomorrow was being released 2 years after Superman, and I'm hearing nothing about that being too soon. Yeah, neither am I. No one is complaining about that at all, are they? It almost gives you the impression that perhaps a lot of that consternation about Batman v Superman came from the sour grapes that they had about Man of Steel, and now that there really isn't any sour grapes about this DCU Superman film, maybe it's, I think it's that, Wally, and I think also, this, we're seeing a plan. Like, we're seeing a plan, and we're seeing an organization, like actual organization, with respect to what DC Studios is doing here. This is a much different perspective, a much different angle towards all of this, business-wise and organizationally, than DC Films did. I think because of what James Gunn has done with the hype, I think because of how he's marketed things, and I think because of how well Superman has been received, how well Creature Commandos and now Peacemaker has been received, I think that there's a lot more confidence out there that a lot of the whiny fans are keeping their mouth shut. that doesn't mean that, the cults are, keeping their mouths shut, because both cults, Snyder and anti-Snyder cult, will not shut the hell up. So, yeah, they're being loud. But as far as any complaints about how soon this is happening, no. I think because this is part of a plan, I think because James Gunn has made it clear that he embraces, like he's sticking to his plan and he has some organization with respect to this. I think that's where, like, a renewed confidence is coming from. That, and again, like I said, how well received his Superman film has been to this point. So I think that's what changes things with respect to that. He says, of course, on a more positive note, it's great that we are getting back-to-back super family movies. Superman in 2025, Supergirl in 2026, and Man of Tomorrow in 2027. I mean, the Superman saga is in full swing, and I am here for it, he says. To see James Gunn put Superman front and center of the DCU and DC Studios is wonderful. And to that person who asked James if he'll have different characters for the DC Studios intro, this isn't Marvel. He says Superman was the first character created and introduced to the DC Pantheon. He's nearly 90 years old, so it is great hearing that James said Superman is their MGM lion. This is what the previous regime failed to do in its tenure. A part of me is also glad that Seven Bucks Production were not heads of DC Studios, even if The Rock wanted to bring Superman back into the fold. There are ways to do these things, and I think James and Peter have found the right formula. Yeah, I agree with all that, Wally, truthfully. And I thought about it because, somebody did a mock-up. I had mentioned before they did a mock-up of the old Peacemaker graphic, and I think they also did one for Batman. They went back to 1938 Detective Comics Batman and, did mock-ups of the DC animation for those. But you're right, this is not Marvel Studios. And the idea of having Superman be the MGM lion of DC Studios, I like that. It's unique, right? And I really do believe that from a creative standpoint and from a business standpoint, I really do think that James Gunn and probably Peter Safran as well are intent on not being a carbon copy of the MCU. They're not going to do everything Feige did. They're not going to do everything Feige does. They're going to differentiate. They're going to put themselves aside from that, right? And I know that regardless of how the overall box office went this summer, I know that the both of them, and probably also their big boss, David Zaslav, they're all very happy that they outgrossed Marvel for the entire summer. Right? Seriously, like the fact that Superman did the best of 4 different comic book films this particular year. Like, you put Superman up against 3 Marvel movies and it beat them all out as far as box office is concerned. And that's not to say that Marvel just utterly failed and outright failed. No, certainly not. Underperformed, perhaps with respect to all 3 of them, but, Fantastic Four First Steps is still the highest grossing Fantastic Four movie of all time, like to date. But this is a victory lap for James Gunn and Peter Safran to engage in, and they're going to keep this different. They're going to. I like the inclination so far to keep the DCU different from the MCU and not have DC Studios just be a carbon copy of Marvel Studios. I thoroughly enjoy that, and giving Superman his due and putting him front and center the way he should have always been. Completely agree, and yeah, I can say that as a Batman fan, it is past time for Superman to get his respect. And it is well-deserved at this point in time. Wally says, to go further into your Flight Alert episode, because yes, I did do a Flight Alert episode last week about the Man of Tomorrow announcement. He says, I haven't read any of the Man of Tomorrow issues from the 90s myself, so I can't be sure if the movie will be based on that or something else entirely. What I can say is that I cannot wait to see Lex and Superman go toe-to-toe on the big screen, and Lex finally in full armor. If it's anything like the animated movies and other stories I have read, he says, it will be epic. Those pictures released in conjunction with the announcement are amazing. Jim Lee, Mitch Gerrits, and Jorge Jimenez should be proud. As for Jorge's pick, yes, it does look like they're about to join forces to face a bigger threat. And if that threat is a certain Coluan, then bring it on. Oh yes, completely agree. The wait for Brainiac is well overdue for his big screen appearance. Besides, it won't be the first time that Supes and Lex have had to work together. There's a certain double episode from Justice League Unlimited where the Justice Lords overtake Earth Prime, and it's up to Lex to find a way to help the League to stop them. I still need to watch Justice League Unlimited and Justice League. I only got about halfway through my DCAU catch-up. There's still both of those shows and like Zeta Project and I think a couple of others as well that I need to watch. But that's on the list, the ever-growing list. He says the computer game DC Universe Online also has a future Lex Luthor going back in time to ask the League to help him prepare for Brainiac's arrival because the villains eventually defeated the heroes, which allowed Brainiac to harvest the Earth. The most recent run of Superman in the comics, separate from Absolute Superman, sees an imprisoned Lex Luthor who is not only given his company to Superman, thus being called Supercore, but is also helping him out with threats. But as we know, Lex still has secrets he doesn't want Superman to know about. You know, I haven't read those other ones, obviously, but I have played DC Universe Online. For a brief period, they actually made it available for console. And if I remember correctly, I had it for the PS3. Yes, I did. And it was a unique situation because you could buy it for $60 or $70 at GameStop, but you couldn't trade it in because it was an online game. And once the code had been used, it was worthless. So it had no trade-in value whatsoever, if I recall correctly, at GameStop. And I remember it took like 24 hours, it took like a whole day to like download the update, and I had to leave it running, right? And I barely played it when I got to play it, and it didn't work as well. It was clunky, and it was whatever. The times where it did work, it was a pretty cool game. But yeah, I'm not much of a PC gamer at all, so that was my extent in terms of getting into DC Universe Online. But that just reminded me when you brought that up. That totally reminded me of that. He says, on the note of the creators who got to visit the Superman set, I know that one of them is Mark Waid, who wrote Superman Birthright. He's the guy who completely lambasted Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. I still don't like him for that, he says, but I don't begrudge him for being part of the creators who got to visit the Superman set by James Gunn. Personally, I would like him to apologize to Zack for the comments he made about Man of Steel. If he has, then fine, or at least has changed on his stance on the movie since then, but at the time, it was not a very nice thing to see from a comic book creator, especially since Man of Steel borrowed elements from Birthright. Just like James Gunn, we know that Zack is also a student of the comics. Yeah, I'm with you on that, you know, and I'm kind of, I hear you, Wally. It would be great if he apologized, if we all saw it. I will say that as a fan, I'm kind of past that point, because I've just resigned myself, you know, after the whole Jeff Johns debacle, you know, and there really is nothing that asshole can do to apologize for any of the stuff that we know that he's done in that regard. So it's one of those cases where the whole separating the art from the artist, I really have to do for these comic book writers and artists, because I've just heard, you know, some shit about them, and it's like, okay, well, I haven't read their runs of this or their runs of that, like Mark Waid's Flash run. I keep hearing things about that, you know, or like you said, Superman Birthright. And it's like, well, if I'm going to read these, then I have to be able to separate the asshole that wrote them from the actual writing, and that's definitely going to be something I have to do with Mark Waid. So if he's a complete prick in real life, you know what? Be that way. You know, he's not somebody that I will, you know, say hello to if I see him at a con, or, you know, might be inclined to flip off if I see in public, right? But his work, that's fine. And in James Gunn's case, being being the creative head of DC Studios, I understand why he would bring those creators there, because this is all a PR move. And it's brilliant PR to get the comic creators involved, right? To get them not only on your side, but also to lend their ear, you know, like as far as marketing and whatnot. This is how you really like approach all of the, you know, the diehard fans, right? The ones that are all about the source material, the ones that get all gatekeepery about whether people have read the comics or not. Because you still want their dollars, you still want their attention, and also, truthfully, from a PR standpoint, it's like, well, if I have them involved in this film, or like, you know, coming out to set, and I schmooze them, then maybe they won't trash me the same way that they trashed Zack Snyder. It's a brilliant idea for PR purposes. You know, there is ass kissing involved with PR with stuff like this, and you know what? A decent amount of that you do have to do professionally, and I can't knock James Gunn for that. I can't. So I get it. You know, I'm just glad that like Scott Snyder and Dan Jurgens and, you know, the other creators that I still really like, Jim Lee, I'm glad that they were all there, because Dan Jurgens, only thing I've ever heard him say disparaging about was he talked about the Agent Liberty character, and I forget if he was referencing how it was adapted in the CW or whatnot, but he had some strong words with respect to that. That's the only thing he said that kind of bugged me, but everything else, like Dan Jurgens, like he is still currently the writer that has written the most Superman that I have read in the comics, because of me reading Death of Superman, because of me reading Funeral for a Friend, because of me reading Superman Hunter Prey, like that, and I still haven't read the Return of Superman. What the hell? And also, you know, the first 30 issues of his Action Comics Rebirth run, which the reason I loved that more than Tomasi's Superman is because it was Jurgens, and it took me back to all the old school stuff that I had read, you know, from his run. So yeah, I was happy that he was involved. I was happy that he was there, and many of the others in that regard. So yeah, I feel you on that. But yeah, sometimes you just have to accept, unfortunately, that a number of these comic creators are complete pieces of shit, as far as their attitudes are concerned and their gatekeeping behavior and whatnot. And sadly, Mark Waid is probably one of those assholes, but it is what it is. So Wally says, anyway, moving on from that, I am really excited for the next chapter in the Superman saga. We'll see what characters James decides to introduce this time around. It's great that we're also likely going to see Isabella Merced's Hawkgirl again. Maybe a couple more Green Lanterns? Who knows? Either way, as I said, I am excited, he says. And the future of the DCU is looking really good. Think I will need a new costume for 2027 and make sure my kids are also kitted out, because by then Micah will be 4 years old and Estelle will be nearly 3 years old. No doubt we will make it a proper family day outcome the release window. Yeah, no, I look forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun for you guys for sure. He says, you know what I just realized? Superman's 90th anniversary will be on April 12th, 2028. I am rather surprised that James didn't go for that as a release date. Maybe they have something more epic in mind. We shall see. Just wanted to point that out. I'm willing to buy that. I'm willing to buy that he has something more epic in mind, because I don't think that he or DC Studios wanted to wait longer than 2 years, because 2 years, I know that we've seen 3 years be a benchmark as far as in between, like a first film and a sequel, but I think 2 years, especially in terms of the saga and building out the DCU, is a good determiner as well. And it's the very next project that he's working on. So, to me, I'm not that he's in a hurry or whatnot, but I think just for scheduling purposes, it also leads me to believe that this was part of his ultimate plan. And in that case, I do even more wholeheartedly buy that he has something more epic planned for that particular date. April 12th, 2028. I hardly think he's going to ignore it. He's paid so much attention to dates and to, comic connections and creations that, I think April 12th, 2028 will certainly be celebrated by DC Studios in some form. What that's going to be, time will only tell. But we're talking even further than Man of Tomorrow and the other parts of the DC. I mean, hey, by that time, Wally, who knows? We might know who the DCU Batman is at that point, and it won't be Robert Pattinson. How about that? It'll be intriguing to see. But either way, thank you for pointing that out. He says, I want to pass on my condolences to the late, great Terrence Stamp, the man who brought General Zod to life in the Christopher Reeve, Richard Donner movies. What a talent he was. May he rest in peace. Yes, indeed. A couple weeks ago, that was when he passed. I posted a Threads video and talked about it. Or not Threads. I think I did post it on Threads, but I certainly posted it on TikTok. But yeah, absolutely, pay your respects. Pay all of our respects to the original cinematic General Zod. Right, whether he is our favorite or not, he certainly was my first introduction to the character without question. And what a phenomenal job he did in the Christopher Reeve, Richard Donner movies, for sure. Totally with you on that. Wally then says, I went to see Freakier Friday, The Naked Gun, the new version, and Weapons 2 or 3 weeks ago, all on the same day. Wow, a three-peat. Okay, how about that? Freakier Friday was funny, and I have to say Jamie Lee Curtis continues to look amazing. I'll agree with that. The film was all about the Lohanaissance. Lindsay Lohan, yes, and it was really good to see Lindsay looking great. The Naked Gun was beginning to end hilariously funny. Both Liam Neeson and Pamela Anderson worked great together. It honored the original greatly. I have heard that. I've absolutely heard that, and that I don't know if I'll get to see it in theaters, but I'll definitely check it out, when it pops up on Paramount Plus or something. He says, Weapons was a rather chilling movie. I won't give away any spoilers, but I will say, if you have an Aunt Gladys in your family, do not, I repeat, do not invite her into your home. Trust me. I didn't have an Aunt Gladys, but I did have a Grandma Gladys. She passed over 20 years ago. But, interesting. I keep hearing the name Aunt Gladys. No one say anything, because I do want to see Weapons. I do. And quite frankly, depending on how digital releases and whatnot go, perhaps it might be a movie that I take in during the month of October. We'll see. We'll see how that goes, because I have an idea of something I'm going to do for October that I will release in the not-too-distant future. But yeah, it's another one of my ambitious ideas, and we'll see how far it goes and how I can find time for it. But either way, yeah, Aunt Gladys, Weapons, intriguing. Can't wait to see what that's all about. Wally says, in terms of TV, we have finished Season 2 of Wednesday. The second part of the season dropped this week. Oh, that's what all that was. I saw a clip, and I'm sure it was like spoiler laden with respect to a situation between Wednesday and another character named Enid. Mind you, I haven't seen even season 1, so I've seen none of Wednesday as full episodes, but I'm aware of the premise, I'm aware of the concept, and I saw that clip, and the clip looked entertaining, and I would like to see it, but I didn't realize, okay, so they have finished, they've released all of season 2 now. Okay, I didn't know what that was. I knew they'd broken up like in half, but I didn't realize the second half of it had released already. Okay, fair enough. He says it looks like we might get a third season of Wednesday, that is, with the way that it ended, and if so, I look forward to more. Okay, well, hey, it'd be great if, this new strategy, Netflix doing the half and half, it'd be great if Wednesday continues to be a successful show for them. I definitely have 16 episodes to get caught up on. I didn't realize it was 8 episodes per season. It's 8 episodes in season 1, and then a total of 8 episodes in season 2. So yeah, I got to find some time to watch 16 episodes of television. Maybe that will also end up happening in October, rather. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Man, ambitious. So much shit to watch. Too much shit to watch. He says we'll be watching episode 3 of Peacemaker later tonight. Also, I hope your predictions for who might show up are true later in the season. That would be awesome. I'm crossing my fingers. We had a new person show up. Not a new person. A new old person show up in episode 3. I talked about it in Flightbox, which I posted earlier today before recording this episode, so can't wait to hear your thoughts with respect to that for all of you. He says, I think I'm 1 episode away from finishing season 3 of Foundation, and I need to watch this week's episode of Strange New Worlds. Last week's episode was really good. In fact, they've all been good. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on those 3 episodes. Yeah, I got behind on Strange New Worlds, and sadly, because of the stuff I was talking about, the busy week that I'm going to be having this week that is going to affect my recording schedule for shows for a little bit, it's going to be a minute before I can get caught up on Strange New Worlds. But I will. There's actually going to be a day or two where I'm going to be able to really get caught up on stuff, and I do intend to get caught up on Strange New Worlds, but it might not happen until after the season finale. In fact, it probably won't happen until after the season finale, so I may have to stay in the bubble, which won't be too difficult considering how busy I will be with other things. Again, I will reveal all of this after it all happens, but it's all good, and it should be an awesome time. That's all I will say with respect to that. But continuing on, he says, by the way, if any of you love watching Abbott Elementary on ABC and then later on Disney Plus, which is how I watch it, I highly recommend a show on YouTube called The Comic Shop. It's an indie show created by Cheyenne Iwulu. I hope I pronounced that right. Known online as Cheyenne the Geek. She's a Nigerian-American nerd, rather, who did a Kickstarter campaign to get her show up and running. Episode 1 dropped last week, and Episode 2 is due later today. When did he send this email? He sent this email 2 days ago. So that email should be, or that episode, rather, should be available now. He says the first episode was about 15 minutes long, so I think they are about that length. Just go on YouTube and subscribe to Awkward Virgo TV. 15 minutes? Even I should be able to handle that. All right, fair enough. But that's a whole other can of worms, talking about YouTube as a TV network, because it is. YouTube absolutely is a TV network. If anybody is listening to this show on the YouTube channel for the Flightcast, you're watching the Flightcast channel. Like, this is part of it. This is why I need to do more videos, because, like, I need to do my own shows and whatnot, because I have a channel on a massive network called YouTube. I should totally do that, right? Wally has one as well, that we've talked about in previous episodes of Flight Chat as well. But I've also seen Wally talk to the creator and publicize the comic shop for the last month or so, truthfully, like before it came out, and certainly now that it is released. So yeah, I feel like I should partake in that as well. Thank you for that. What is that again? Awkward Virgo TV. Have to make certain to subscribe to that. Thank you, all of you. He says, in other news, we had a tragedy in our household 2 weeks ago. Our beloved Siberian cat, Troy, had to be put down. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. He had been struggling with an illness, he says, and was not going to the toilet much. Turns out his bladder was the issue. My partner took him to the emergency vets to get looked at. They said it was either put him down or pay £3,000 for surgery. But the surgery would not guarantee that the issue wouldn't return and that this kind of thing happens a lot with cats. So in the end, she had to say goodbye to him. The house is a lot quieter without him. He was a soft cat and a very unique character. We will miss him dearly. The kids are still very young, so it does not cause them upset. But my partner was absolutely devastated and cried for days. I too cried. But we're getting on with life without him, and maybe one day we will get another cat. For those of you who have pets, please hug them tightly. And he sent a picture. He did send a picture of Troy. Yeah, that's a cat. And I don't mean that in a derisive sense. It's like the whole look on his face and his eyes, just the way that he's sitting on the couch. I mean, that is a definitive cat, without question. And yeah, definitely. I'm not necessarily a cat person myself, Wally. I'm more of a dog person, despite what Shonda may tell you. She tells everybody that I don't like dogs, and it's not true. It's not that I don't like dogs. I don't like dog maintenance. I know at some point when we get out of our current situation and we go into another living situation, we're going to have a dog. I know that. I've resigned myself to that. So I'm going to have to get used to dog maintenance when that happens. But pets, whether they're dogs or cats, they're members of the household. They're absolutely special, and very deep emotional connections are made between us and our pets. And so I understand that you and your partner are hurting, and certainly my condolences. I hope all of you feel better. Like you said, the kids aren't really affected, and that's good that they're too young to really be affected by that. But, there'll come a time when all of you bond to the next cat, which I do think you'll get another cat. I've been through this. My aunties and others have done the same thing with respect to their cats and pets and whatnot. And so I think when the time comes, you'll feel comfortable with it, and you'll bond to another pet. And that's just, that's what we do. And that's what they do for sure. So my condolences to you on that one. Hang in there, good buddy, with respect to that. He says, and to finish off, Estelle has started nursery this week. She was in for 3 days, but has enjoyed it. She turned 10 months as of yesterday, and I think she is close to walking, which will be fun, as it means she can finally take on her big brother. Ha ha. Truth be told, she's already able to match him strength for strength. Wow. All right, at 10 months? Me, he says, I'm just going to sit back and eat my popcorn whilst they duke it out. I don't care who started it, just entertain me, please. Haha. Does your partner feel the same way? Probably not, but I'm with you on that one. Just entertain me, please. Oh, and thank you, he says, for your recent Son Just Don't rants. They were very much needed, especially the Snoop Dogg one. Yikes. Yeah, I felt real strongly about that one. I had a lot to say about Snoop Dogg's dumbass, but I appreciate that, Wally. Thank you for the enjoyment that you got out of it. He says, and that's it for me this week. Enjoy the football season, and I hope your team does well. Give my best to Shonda, and I hope you both have a great weekend and week ahead. I've also attached a pic of our cat, Troy. He was 8 years old. Yep, I just mentioned that. Thank you, Wally Mustafa. Thank you, as always, for the feedback, Wally. You greatly appreciated. I will give my best to Shonda. As like I said, we have a busy week ahead of us with some awesome stuff going on. But I will also say, with respect to football season and hoping my team does well, both of my teams lost this weekend. Michigan did not look good against Oklahoma last night, and the Lions look worse against the Green Bay Packers today. So tomorrow on Sports Talk Radio, there's going to be a lot of vetching and, people being rather pissed off at both of those teams. So it's rough. It's only week 1 and week 2 of the season for those respective teams. But thank you for the good well wishes. Thank you for the good luck. Hopefully it will end up being a good football season for me. But best of luck to you, and give my best to you and yours as well. All right, next up, Alex De Silva chimes in this week with an email titled Flight Chat number 17, Joker v. Thanos, Dusk of Anarchy. Oh, that's intriguing. What could he possibly be talking about there? It says, Alex asked Ray if he ever falls behind on podcast listening and for his opinion on college football. Also posed several either-or questions about villains, movie trailers, and Star Wars casting. Shared his thoughts on several recent movies, including his ranking of Emmy nominees, and discussed the Peacemaker opening and Man of Tomorrow. And also discussed reading the Walking Dead comics and shared detailed thoughts on 2 Star Trek TNG episodes. Okay, detailed thoughts. All right, here we go. So a lot to get to. Alex says, hey, Ray, I think I'm probably getting this one in just under the wire. When did he send this? Ooh, late Saturday night. No, you made it. You totally made it because I didn't record this until Sunday. He says, things have been crazy busy these past few weeks, and I've fallen so far behind on my podcast listening. I'm still like 3 weeks behind in my backlog, so I think I'm going to have to bite the bullet, just leave all those episodes by the wayside, and simply jump to episodes released in the past day or so. Otherwise, I'll never catch up. Does this type of thing ever happen to you? Do you ever fall so far behind on your podcast listening that catching up just feels like an insurmountable task? It depends on the podcast, Alex. Like, there was a podcast that I used to listen to before I actually started podcasting myself over at Squadcast Media. It was a show called The Greatest Generation, which is still going, I might add. And the reason I know it's still going is because Apple Podcast still gives me alerts as to when their new episodes get posted. And what it was it's these two guys, I think Ben and Chris, if I remember, I think that's what their names are. And this was recommended to me by a coworker many years ago. And what it was they started doing episodes where they were going through the entirety of Star Trek The Next Generation. Ben and Adam, pardon me. Adam Pranica and Benjamin R. Harrison are the two hosts. And they started this off years ago, talking about all of TNG. Like, they went through episode by episode. Each episode was a different episode of TNG. They did this so far ago that by the time they were almost through TNG, Discovery was starting. So I started listening to this in like 2015, 2016, in that time frame, right? And I got through all of their episodes of TNG. And I definitely got through most of their episodes of like season 1 of Discovery. And then when I started podcasting myself, I kind of stopped listening around there. I remember one of them said something disparaging about Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. I was like, okay, I don't need to necessarily listen to that any further. But they've kept going, and they've gone through Deep Space Nine. They've gone through Voyager, and I think now they are currently on Enterprise. In fact, the most recent episode that they posted last week was about Season 3, Episode 17 of Enterprise. I can't listen to those because I obviously have not watched Enterprise. But if I were to get back into this show. But it would be one of those cases where if I ever wanted to listen to the show again, I have years, literally, of episodes to get caught up on. But for me, because of the style of show, because every episode of the podcast is about a different episode of my favorite franchise, right? And they're going through each of the shows. To me, the catch-up would be a lot, but I would be looking forward to it because as someone that's watched all those episodes, that's what it was for me with TNG. It was like, oh, I can't wait to hear what they say about this episode or what they say about that episode. That was the entertainment value in it for me. So I think it really depends on the podcast itself and what they're talking about. I know that a number of you have said that you listen to me and not necessarily like, weekly or like, day of release. Like I know some of you have had like at least I've been told in the past, maybe this has changed, that my show you guys listen to like a couple of episodes deep into and like get caught up for the week, something to that effect. And I need to do more in depth in terms of like how that works and like how everybody like enjoys what I do or how everybody listens to what I do, like for listening habits and whatnot. But for me, my stuff, a lot of it is timely. Like I don't do a whole lot of evergreen stuff. The reviews would be, like if I, talked about, if I did something to what they did, I talked about old shows and old movies, and it was the same thing for you, where like you can't wait to hear what I had to say about this particular movie or this particular show, then I think that might be, like for me personally, that would be a lot less insurmountable of a task because it's like, okay, well, I'm looking forward to this, I'm looking forward to that. There's more to look forward to because they're talking about a show or a movie that I've already seen, and I just want to hear their thoughts and whatnot on it. It's difficult, or it's different rather, than listening to a topical show that talks about, oh, well, here's the news here and there's the news there, especially if you've already heard what that news is. It really, you're just listening to it for my opinion, and I appreciate that so many of you care about my opinion with respect to this stuff. I really do appreciate that. But yeah, I think it would depend on the type of podcast as to whether or not, but if you're asking if I've ever fallen so far behind, yeah, because I've fallen behind on Greatest Generation, and I haven't deleted it. So there's a part of me that's like thinking at some point, do I dive back into this? I have years to get caught up on. I have Deep Space Nine. They went through all of Deep Space Nine. That's 7 seasons, in the traditional TV format, so 24 to 26 episodes. They went through all 7 seasons of Voyager, and now they're on Enterprise. And I can't listen to their Enterprise episodes until I watch Enterprise, right? And I should also point out that they're part of the Maximum Fun podcast network, and they do ads, right? And Maximum Fun back then only had like a couple of shows, but now it says that Maximum Fun is a worker-owned network of artist-owned shows supported directly by our audience. Since 2004, Max Fun has empowered creators to bring good things into the world. They have a website, and they had 67 shows. It's incredible. But yeah, there were ads, right? At least there were ads the last time I heard The Greatest Generation. So maybe they've changed that. Maybe now it is just audience supported and there are no more ads. Maybe that's a little different because they used to do stuff with like HelloFresh. HelloFresh was like one of their big sponsors back then. But yeah, there's a ton here. Wow, look at this. Maximum Film. There's a show called Greatest Trek, which, you know what? Hang on. No, that's the same guys, because I remember they did a separate show for Discovery. So they did it. clearly what they've done is they kept going, and they probably went through all of they went through like Discovery, they went through Picard, and now they're going, they might have even gone through Lower Decks, and now they're going through Strange New Worlds. And they're doing that, like, yep, here we go. The unofficial, irreverent, and filthy after show for all the new Star Trek television, Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, Short Treks, Prodigy, Strange New Worlds. Oh, they talked about Prodigy as well? Damn. And anything else they throw at us each Friday after a new episode of Star Trek. Adam and Ben recap, review, and roast all the new Trek. Check out our other show, yep, The Greatest Generation, da-da-da-da. Exactly, yeah. So, yeah. If I ever dive back into this, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a whole hell of a lot. With respect to me getting caught up on this, but I haven't put that aside. I have not tossed that aside and said no, I'm definitely not going to do it. So I can relate. I can relate on some level, at least with that particular podcast, Alex, for sure. Next up, he says, "What would you say to the people who say that college football isn't worth watching because it's not the top level of football?" So, to that, I would say that with respect to, I would ask, what is your top level of football? Because if you think NFL is the top level of football, then I would ask you, like, what makes you think that it is top level? Is it because it's the highest level? Because there are issues within the NFL, like with respect to like how things play. Here, take today, for example. The Lions got their clock cleaned today by the Green Bay Packers 27-13. And I can tell you a good reason why that happened. The same reason why, Miami got destroyed by the Indianapolis Colts. Daniel Jones and the Indianapolis Colts. What? Really? Seriously? There were a couple of good games today that I saw in Red Zone. A couple of good games. Jets and Steelers, that was a damn good game. That was a really good game. That was shot for shot, some back and forth. That was really cool. The whole, Justin Fields versus Aaron Rodgers, that was a good game. That was an entertaining game. And then the Bengals-Browns, even though it was low scoring, that went down to the wire. There were a bunch of games that went down to the wire in the witching hour of Red Zone today. But by and large, you have a situation where a lot of these teams, the Lions included, don't really play their starters in the preseason, which means that they take the whole first month of the season to get on track, either offensively or defensively. The Lions did this last year. They went 2-1. Actually, they went 3-1 in September. They didn't get their offense on track until that week 4 against Seattle. Right, they scored like 26 points and an overtime win against the Rams in week 1. Then they scored 16 points and lost by 4 to Tampa Bay at home, right? 20-16. Couldn't even find the end zone that much, if at all. Then they beat Arizona 20-13 on the road the week after that. And then in week 4, they scored 6 touchdowns, pardon me. 42-27, I think, was the final score against 42-29, I think, was the final score between them and Seattle. Right, like they put up a ton of offense, and Jared Goff had a perfect game, right? But it took them better part of 2-3 weeks to get their offense on track. And I guarantee the same thing is happening now. Whereas, like, I look at these stats for, Goff and the Lions, and they're abysmal. They're terrible. Like, he threw for 225 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. He got sacked 4 times. They only had 46 yards rushing as a team. That is utterly unacceptable. So that would be my question. The people who say that college isn't worth watching because it's not the top level of football, what happens when the pros lay an egg? When the pros give you dog shit? Because they do. They most certainly do. There are plenty of pro games that suck, that are not good. And this particular week, this past week, college football, it was a lot of teams playing Little Sisters of the Poor, right? There were a lot of really shitty matchups in week 2, except ours. Michigan had to play Oklahoma on the road with a freshman quarterback. Yeah, no wonder we sucked ass. No wonder we didn't do well, because we just don't do well historically against a top tier opponent on the road in week 2. Everybody else is figured out. Just schedule patsies until you get to the conference schedule, and that'll be your way into the playoff. But now we're working with a loss. We only really have one more loss, because 10-2 is really got to be your minimum to try and get into the playoff, right? Especially, given the schedule that we have. But either way, I think that there are issues with both the way the college game is played and with the way the pro game is played. And it really just comes down to how much of a fan of football you are. To me, I'm a fan of football. I'll watch high school football. I'm not even joking. Like, I've contemplated going to high. The only thing about going to high school football games is it's weird if you go to a high school football game and either you're not there covering it for a paper or a blog or whatever, or if you're not like an alma mater of the school. I don't want to be the weirdo that just goes to like high school football games, right? But I would watch high school football. I would. Like, if they televise it, I would watch high school football because I just enjoy the sport. Like, to me, it's not about levels in that regard. So that's what I would say is like, if you, and I got coworkers that only watch NFL, but they don't disparage college, right? College is just not, their bread and butter. They're more pro fans than they are college fans. It's a different it's a different breed. Now it's changing. College is getting closer to being semi-pro in that regard, but I don't think it has anything to do with the quality level, because I think there's issues with the quality of NFL football just as there can be issues with the quality of college football, truthfully. And it's all subjective. Like, that part of it, Alex, is truly subjective. If you really think that the NFL is that much of a higher class of football than college, hey, more power to you. I see them do stupid shit. I see guys drop punts and kickoffs, right? You'd think, being the 1% of, the 1% of kids drafted from college, that all those mistakes and brain farts would be gone. But no, they do stupid shit in the pros. They'll drop the ball before crossing the plane, and then it's not actually a touchdown in the pros. It'll be a touchback. They fumble stupidly. They call timeouts stupidly. Coaches and players do dumb-ass things in the NFL, just like they do in college. So to me, I don't see much of a difference. I really don't, to be honest with you, as far as like quality is concerned. Maybe it was that way in the past, but it's not that way anymore. So I would just say that those people who think it's not worth watching college, that is, because it's not the top level of football, hey, you can go ahead and be elitist if you like. Alex, do you feel that way? It doesn't sound like you feel that way. It sounds like you were just asking that question. But either way, yeah, that's just gatekeeping as far as I'm concerned, because I just enjoy football. I enjoy football in general, but either way. So he says, let's shift gears into geeky stuff with a quick either-or question. Which villain do you think is the bigger pop culture icon? Ledger's Joker or Brolin's Thanos? Ledger's Joker. And the reason I say that is because the Joker itself has a pedigree that Thanos does not have. And listen, I'm not telling you that Thanos is not a pop culture icon. Clearly he is. And in the Disney era of, Marvel Studios, yes, most certainly. But his era really only started, 8 years ago? Not even 8 years ago. Because, 8 years ago was his first appearance. Or was it 8? Hang on, my math is off on this. No. 11 years ago. 11 years ago in 2014 was Thanos' first appearance. Josh Brolin's Thanos' first appearance in Guardians of the Galaxy. Right? He had a brief, quick cameo there, and then, he had the mid-credit scene in Avengers Age of Ultron the following year where he's like, fine, I'll do it myself. But not until 2018. Not until Avengers Infinity War did the general populace and pop culture really know who Thanos was. So he's had 8 years, or 7 years, I guess. Man, can I get my math going? Whatever. 7 years, Thanos has been a pop culture icon. The Joker has been a pop culture icon for longer than that, and Ledger's Joker has. And I would give the nod to Ledger's Joker because when people ask who's the best Joker, he comes into the conversation, right? And depending on who you talk to, like if you're talking to fans, you're going to get a bunch of different answers. You're going to get people saying Ledger. You're going to get people saying Nicholson. You're going to get a ton of people saying Mark Hamill in the animated series, right? You might get some that say they like Arthur Fleck, but probably not a ton. But you'll get even less that say Jared Leto's Joker because we barely saw him in that regard, right? But you're going to get a multitude of answers. You might even get somebody that says Cesar Romero, right? And that's kind of the point, is that the pedigree of the Joker and the history of the Joker goes into Ledger's Joker consideration as far as being a bigger pop culture icon, because there's all that history, and then there's the performance that he had in the movie that still to this day is heralded as the pinnacle of DC filmmaking. I disagree. I very much disagree, because I still consider Batman Begins to be the best of the TDK trilogy. However, with respect to perception, it's The Dark Knight and everybody else, and it's because of his performance. It's because of what Ledger did in that film. And, there is also some posthumous notoriety as well, right? And I'm certainly not wishing anything like that for Josh Brolin. I'm just saying that also helps rise Ledger's pop culture status, may he rest in peace, with respect to that. Especially all that bullshit, and I hated that this happened, but the nonsense about people suggesting that the reason he died is because the Joker role messed with his head. That's always been disgusting. It's always been horrible. Close friends and family of Heath Ledger's have been debunking that for years. It did not have anything to do with that shit. It had to do with what was going on with his family life and what was happening with his kids and whatnot. That's what really had him in not the greatest place back in 2008 when he sadly, tragically passed away months before the release of The Dark Knight. But either way, yeah, I would say Ledger's Joker definitely is the bigger pop icon, I would say, for sure. And I understand asking the question, and I understand having the discussion, but I think ultimately it's Ledger's Joker hands down. So now I understand your title of your email. All right, cool. Thank you for that. That was a good question. He also asks, do you think it's possible that studios put things that would normally be big spoilers in trailers because of scoopers? For example, scoopers spoiled that Red Hulk would be in Brave New World long before the movie came out. Do you think Marvel Studios chose to put Red Hulk all over the marketing because of this? As if they said, the secret's already out, we might as well use it to sell more tickets? If this is true, it's just yet another reason to hate scoopers. They really do just ruin the fun for the rest of us. The reason I don't think that's the case, Alex, is because, one, the general audience still largely doesn't know or care about scoopers. If I go to 10 people, random people, and ask them who Grace Randolph is, or who Humberto Gonzalez is, or who Jeff Snyder is, or if they read the rap or anything like that, they're not going to know who the hell I'm talking about. And they don't read or pay attention to any of that stuff. By and large, the general audience, the people that really, push the box office of these movies into the stratosphere. So I really don't think that guides a whole lot of the studio's position with respect to what they put in trailers. What I do think guides them is they're looking at, we need a big splash. We need something massive. We need something to attract their attention. And do I think that in Marvel's case, they were concerned about what Feige said afterwards? Remember a couple weeks ago, however long ago it was, around San Diego Comic-Con time, he said that the reason Brave New World didn't do as well is because it wasn't Steve Rogers, because it wasn't like Chris Evans, and it was kind of a slam, directly or indirectly, either way, to Anthony Mackie and what he did, not only in that movie, but also the work he did in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And as fans, we can definitely take that as, wow, that's bullshit, shots fired, but either way, like, that's what the producers are thinking. They're like, well, we made all this money with Captain America, Steve Rogers, and we put him in the Avengers, and we don't have him in this movie, so we need something bigger we need something flashy and something, like massive to like be a hook for the audience. This is why, and whether people agree with this or not, and I know when I bring this up, people are going to hate it, and I get why. But when they put Doomsday in the last trailer for Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, fans, I think to this day, still are irate about that. Still didn't like that. Regardless of all the other bullshit that people talk about with that movie, they still hate the fact that Doomsday was in that trailer. And I guarantee you that the producers and the studio said, put him in the trailer because that'll be a hook. We need a big hook for people to draw them into the theaters. And I guarantee it was the same with Red Hulk. Same thing with Red Hulk. They're like, Anthony Mackie as new Captain America is not enough. We need Red Hulk in order to make the trailer shiny and new for the audience to really gravitate toward it and really make certain to drive home that they need to go see this film. Didn't work as well as they wanted it to, but I think that's definitely more of their rationale than scoopers. I don't think scoopers move the needle nearly as much as we think they do. They do for us, but not for the general audience. Because remember, the general audience is not paying attention to the same news that we pay attention to. They're not looking at the same sources that we look at. They're not on social media or Reddit nearly as much as we are in that regard. So I think that's where the difference comes into play. So, I mean, I'm fine with having another reason to hate scoopers. I'm perfectly fine with that because scooper madness is the scourge of our existence as fans. But I don't truly believe that is one of the reasons. Not overall. Maybe one or two people in like the studio system like feel that way, but not everybody. That's what I believe personally with respect to that. So next, Alex talks a bit of Star Wars here. He says the Star Wars Starfighter movie has been casting some pretty big established actors. So far, it looks like we'll see Ryan Gosling, Mia Goth, Matt Smith, Amy Adams, and Aaron Pierre in the movie. Do you think it could be distracting for a Star Wars movie to be filled with movie stars like this one is? Usually in Star Wars movies, we traditionally get a lot of unknown actors and a lot of C and B-list actors, but this one's got a ton of recognizable faces. Ordinarily, I would see that particular perspective, Alex. I don't think that's going to be the case for this one. And the reason I say that is because I think that Lucasfilm is trying to make a big splash. It's been a minute since we've had a Star Wars movie, right? Not since Episode 9, right? Rise of Skywalker, right? And we've gotten accustomed over the last 6 years to Star Wars on television in that regard. So I get it. I understand, and I know we're going to get Mandalorian and Grogu beforehand, but that's going to be an extension of TV. No, I think that this is an attempt to really bring the general audience back into the fold with respect to Star Wars, and because if it's been that long, right? Like I could see somebody at Lucasfilm looking at it going, okay, well it's been however long since there's been a movie. We can't assume that they've all been watching the shows on Disney Plus, because they're not even that big on the shows on Disney Plus themselves, right? Because obviously how they feel about the Acolyte and Obi-Wan Kenobi and Book of Boba Fett, they're like, I don't know, it's been kind of hit and miss, even though it hasn't been. They have not missed for me at all, subjectively speaking, with respect to Star Wars television. I've enjoyed all of it, and I still need to watch Skeleton Crew. Damn it, too much shit to watch. Anyway, I think that they're just trying to make a big splash. And ordinarily, I would say, it's different, like with Star Trek. Like, I don't know, because Star Trek had such a cult following, like when they were talking about, Matt Damon as Kirk, before Chris Pine got cast, I was like, that's too big of a name, I don't think. Because then you're comparing the Shatner comparisons and all that. No, you got to have an unknown in order to weather all of that. I think if this were a Star Wars movie where you're rebooting things, and if you were casting Ryan Gosling as Luke Skywalker and Mia Goth as Princess Leia or something to that effect, then yeah, I agree that would be distracting and that would be too much. But the Star Wars Starfighter movie, you're telling a different story within the Star Wars universe that's connected to all of it, and it's not the Skywalker saga characters in that regard. So I think you can certainly get away with it and use it as a vehicle to have bigger stars bring the general audience back into the Star Wars fold, because it's been 6 years since we've had a Star Wars film released in theaters. So I get the concern, I do. I think this is their attempt, and we'll see if it works with respect to putting big names in it, to see if it draws people back to the theaters to see a Star Wars film. All right, then Alex says, we're officially in September, which means Scarathon has begun. I kicked off mine by watching a modern classic for the first time, The Babadook. In the movie, I was hoping for a money shot of Mr. Babadook himself, but all you ever get are quick flashes, which sucks because he has such a great design. I watched this movie on a tablet in a dark room late at night with headphones in, and I had to resist the urge to mute the volume during parts where I suspected incoming jump scares. But this made the experience weirdly more fun and engaging, like I was right there in the room with the characters being terrorized. So Scarathon starts in September? So, here, I'll ask you a question, Alex. Which, by the way, I have not seen The Babadook, but it is one that I have been curious about. But I'll ask you this question. If someone were to marathon a lot of Halloween content, a scarathon of their own, you would suggest not waiting till October? You would suggest starting in September? Like that is your thought process? And mind you, I know that your schedule is very different now because you've got a child and wife and child to deal with. I get that, and other business in real life. But if I were to do that, knowing what you know about my schedule and what I do, should I just start now, in September? Or a week from now is really what I should say, because really things are too busy for me this week to start it now. But are you saying that if I had a bunch of scary movies that I wanted to watch, I should start in September? Let me know. Seriously, next Flight Chat, which that'll be a bit more of a delayed schedule as well. But next Flight Chat email you send in, please let me know, because I'm genuinely curious what your thoughts are with respect to what I should do for that. Because if you're saying we're in September and Scarathon begins in September, that's it. I hadn't thought of that. Make it be 2 months instead of only the month of October. All right, fair enough. Well, The Babadook is on my list. I would like to watch that. I am curious about it, to be honest with you. But you did not watch just scary movies. You said, I've also watched this year's Emmy-nominated movies. The only one I skipped was that Bridget Jones movie on Peacock because I just have zero interest in that one. I've seen one Bridget Jones movie, the first one. It was all right. Not something that I needed to necessarily watch the rest of the franchise. And in fact, didn't even know, oh wow, they franchised this. Okay, how about that? He says, first up was Nona's. This one got me. I don't know how to describe it other than as a warm hug of a movie. This one left me craving authentic Italian food when I was done with it. I could see that, Alex. I could absolutely see that being one of those cultural warm hugs of a movie for sure. He says, next up was Rebel Ridge. The second and third acts felt like pretty standard action thriller fare, but man, That first act was a masterclass in suspense and in keeping the audience on the edge of their seat. This movie probably had one of the best first acts of any modern movie I've seen in recent years. It starts and you're immediately just hooked from the very first scene. That, of course, is Aaron Pierre. That's a Netflix film, right? Aaron Pierre, Don Johnson, Anna Sophia Robb, and David Denman, who, of course, we know right now as Peacemaker's brother, Kevin, I believe, in Peacemaker. Yeah, so, and David Denman's been in a bunch of stuff other than that. But yeah, I'd heard great things about Rebel Ridge, and it kind of, elevated Aaron Pierre's stature like after Krypton, because Krypton is still what I know him from, first and foremost, Dev M, and that's primarily why I'm looking forward to him as Jon Stewart in Lanterns. But either way, I've heard great things about Rebel Ridge. I am somewhat curious about that when I finally get caught up on some Netflix stuff, because man, I got a list of just Netflix things to get caught up on, and not just shows either, shows and movies on Netflix. So yeah, too much shit to watch. He says, after that I watched Mountainhead, which is about 4 billionaires meeting up at a friend's mountaintop mansion while the rest of society is breaking down due to uncontrollable AI advances caused by the billionaires' own companies. This one had an interesting concept, but the story doesn't go anywhere. The characters are insufferable and unlikable, and the ending is so underwhelming, easily my least favorite of this year's Emmy nominees. That's unfortunate. That really is unfortunate, because that does sound like a great concept. If there was any type of, anything endearing. I mean, granted, it's billionaires, and I get the argument is well, they're supposed to be insufferable and unlikable because they're billionaires. But any redeeming qualities in any of them, like any humanity whatsoever, especially if they created that situation, I don't know. But yeah, that's disappointing. And he says, finally, I watched what turned out to be my favorite of this year's nominees, The Gorge. I knew nothing about this movie going into it other than it's about 2 snipers stationed in towers across from each other, so I had no way of being prepared for what this movie actually is. I don't want to say anything that could even remotely spoil what this movie gets into, but I definitely recommend this one. It's got plenty of cool action and a really intriguing premise. Yeah, I saw the trailer for The Gorge, so the trailer already gives away that it's more than what you just described. So I don't know any further than what the trailer told me, so I don't even know, you still know more than I do, but yeah, it does sound like an intriguing premise. And I actually like Miles Teller, and I also like Anya Taylor-Joy. So yeah, I am curious about that. And if people are wondering why we're talking about movies, right, as far as being Emmy nominated, because isn't the Emmys television? Well, these are movies that came out on TV networks, right? Netflix is a TV network, and it released Rebel Ridge. Apple TV Plus is a TV network, and it released The Gorge, right? Mountainhead, which I should mention stars Steve Carell, Corey Michael Smith, Jason Schwartzman, and Rami Youssef, that's HBO Max. Right, so that's why we're talking Emmys with respect to these movies, because these are movies that weren't theatrically released, movies that were released on television networks, because apps are television networks. HBO Max is a television network. Hulu is a television network. Disney Plus is a television network. That is the landscape. That's how it is, and that's why whenever people talk about, well, they should just do away with Peacock, they should just do away with this, it's like, no, they're not, because that would be like doing away with NBC. They'd be like doing away with CBS and all the major, like ABC and all that. No, you're not going to do that, because those apps are literally the TV channels, for internet, for streaming in that regard, right? You've got your major TV networks, and the apps are the extension of that, and they make their own content as well, and that's why they got all nominated for Emmys. So this is the world that we live in, and get used to it, because it's going to continue in this direction. So, all right, but yeah, it looks like you caught all of the and Nona's. Who released Nona's? I forget who released that. That was also Netflix. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I remember that and just forgot. But either way, all right. So yeah, tons of movie catch up. He says my ranking for this year's movies, or this year's nominees rather, are as follows: 1, The Gorge; 2, Rebel Ridge; 3, Nona's; and 4, Mountainhead. He says Mountainhead was the only movie on the list I truly disliked. Nona's is good, it just gives you a much different flavor, pun intended, and vibe than the top 2, which are action movies, but the top 3 on that list are all solid movies that I can recommend. All right, thank you for the recommendations. I'm not going to lie, I am still curious about Mountainhead, truthfully, so if I ever get to a point where I get to watch all 4 of these, I think I still would watch that one, but yeah, thank you for the recommendations. He says, not going to lie, when I first saw the new Peacemaker opening, my initial reaction was, yeah, this is nowhere near as good as the first seasons. But now, after having seen it twice more, it's really starting to grow on me. Let's see how much my fondness for it grows by the end of the season. I'm with you on that, Alex, because the first time I was like, they're just copying the same shtick. I've now watched it 3 times now, and I mean, aside from me liking "Oh Lord" by Foxy Shazam more than "Do You Want to Taste It," I do like this. This opening has grown on me, and I actually do like it better with respect to how the season or how the opening goes and how the song goes and how the dance number goes. So yeah, I'm with you on that. It has definitely grown on me for sure. He says the third episode was pretty good. It's weird that both seasons so far have waited until episode 3 to really kick off and give us some cool action. Yeah, although in the first season we definitely got more in terms of like the plot, like the big twist. There was a big twist at the end of episode 3 in the first season where it was like, oh, that's what this is with the whole Project Butterfly thing. And we didn't get quite that here. We could have, but we didn't quite get that with this third episode, but I suspect that we'll have more to elaborate on for sure, and I talked about it definitely in Flightbox that I released earlier today. He says, before the Man of Tomorrow announcement, Gunn said that he wasn't working on a Superman sequel, but rather a new chapter in the Superman saga. I'm not sure exactly what this means, so Man of Tomorrow isn't Superman 2, but will it feature the same principal cast from the first movie and continue the first movie's plot points? Doesn't this technically make it a sequel? These are rhetorical questions, of course, but I'm looking forward to getting more details as we get closer to the movie's release. I know the rhetorical questions, Alex, but I also think it's and mind you, I don't want this to come across like there are times where I feel like you have nitpicked things. I don't think this is particular. I'm not saying this is an example of you nitpicking. However, I think, and I talked about this on Vodka Stream the other night, because Phil Barker, he was all like, why doesn't James stop being so cryptic and just say what it is? And I'll say what I said to him and to Dave and Will and the others and Chris Balga. I'll say what I said to them. I said, with respect to James Gunn, we have to remember he is a creative first, not a producer first. So the last thing he wants is he doesn't want a Superman sequel to be like Superman: The Man of Tomorrow or Superman 2. No, he doesn't want numbers. He's looking at it from a storytelling standpoint. The Superman saga isn't just about Superman. He doesn't even think that the first Superman film was just about Superman. It focused heavily on Superman. He was the main character. But it world built for the rest of the DCU. And that's what he's looking at this second film in the Superman saga to be. Not a direct sequel, right? Because if we're being honest and we look at direct sequels tend to not involve a whole lot of other characters in the rest of the universe. Okay, look at the Iron Man trilogy. Who else really showed up in the Iron Man trilogy? No, Rhodey does not count. No, he does not count. And yeah, Banner was talking to him, but that was later, like at the end of the movie. It wasn't like Hulk fought with Iron Man throughout all of Iron Man 3 in that regard, right? So, like, the sequels focus on just them. And the Guardian sequels are kind of another example. It's not like other characters came into the fray. It was really just the Guardians going through everything, right? Whereas in Superman and the way that he's structuring the Superman saga, other characters could show up, not just as cameos, but lend a hand, like the Justice Gang did, right? Like, who knows how this could play out with respect to how he's telling a world-building story in the DCU. And he made the first Superman film in the DCU an ensemble piece. Yeah, it's centered around Superman, but there's a great deal of agency for Lois Lane and the Daily Planet characters in terms of them, helping resolve the plot. There's what the Justice Gang does in terms of helping with their efforts, not only to take down the kaiju, but also the Jaranpur stuff. Like, there's a lot of other elements going on where, if people wanted to really nitpick and say, well, it's not really a Superman movie. Well, no, it is, because it focuses on Superman. But the Superman saga doesn't have to be so specifically on Superman. It can encompass a whole lot of other characters without being a direct sequel in the strictest sense of a direct sequel. So I feel like it's, splitting hairs, truthfully. If you want to call it a Superman sequel, you can call it a Superman sequel. But if he doesn't want to refer to it that way, I don't think it's like, well, he's saying it's not. It's how he feels about it as a creative, and I respect that. I do. I respect the way he feels about it as a creative, to be honest with you. So that's just how I look at it. And I realize I just answered your rhetorical questions, but that's just, I wanted to get my thoughts with respect to that, because I've been talked about that the other night on Vodka Stream, and that's how I feel about it. He says, before getting into TNG this week, I also wanted to share that I've been reading a lot of comics over the past couple of months. Specifically, I've been reading The Walking Dead. It's 193 issues long, and I'm currently around issue 135, he says. It's good stuff. Very story-driven and character-focused. To me, the most refreshing thing is that it has a clear beginning, middle, and end. No need to keep track of miniseries that take place between issues, a bunch of spin-off series, etc. You just start at issue 1 and keep reading till you get to issue 193. I'll definitely have to revisit the TV series after I finish reading. Well, I imagine that's because, I mean, with other books, like with DC books or even Marvel, like you're dealing with like team up potential, and like miniseries occur because you're dealing with characters that like have their own books that come in and like, okay, there's a crossover here, there's a big event there, right? Like I think that's where that comes from. You wouldn't get that with a book like The Walking Dead, right? I mean, I'm still a novice when it comes to reading comics, so I'm not familiar with any comics that do have that aren't like DC or Marvel that have all these other characters with their own books or whatnot. But that's just my perspective on it, being a novice. So I could see where this would be more straightforward for you. All right, on to his Star Trek watch update. He's still in the middle of Season 4 of TNG. He watched 2 more episodes. He said 2 great episodes, he says. First up was Future Imperfect. First, he says, it was so jarring to me that they didn't sing Happy Birthday before Riker blew the candles out. Yeah, I don't know. They've done that before? I don't know. I'm trying to think of other birthday episodes, other birthday scenarios, and other episodes where they've done that or not. I don't remember. Can't immediately recall. He says, one random thought that I had while watching is that in TNG, no one says the famous Beam Me Up line that the original series made famous. That's because Beam Me Up Scotty isn't real. Like, there is never anywhere in the original series, never anywhere in Star Trek does anybody actually say, Beam Me Up Scotty, Alex. That is a false line. That is complete marketing nonsense. Beam Me Up Scotty has never been said, like ever, in the entirety of the franchise. Kirk has said, Scotty, beam me up in Star Trek IV The Voyage Home, and he's also said, beam us up, Mr. Scott. But he's never said, beam me up, Scotty. That's never, ever been said in any Star Trek incarnation. So don't look for it, because not even the original series said it. That's just a crazy way that it's been twisted by pop culture. He says, this episode showed me something I thought I'd never see, a Ferengi in a Federation uniform. Yeah, that is, well, I don't want to give things away, because let's just say that may be seen at some point down the road, depending on how much more of the franchise you intend to watch past TNG. Amr may or may not have already seen it. I'll just say that. Alex says, speaking of uniforms, it was interesting they decided to put Deanna in a Starfleet uniform. I've gotten so used to her usual getup. We had to talk about this, because Amr brought this up during his watch update, and we had a discussion about this. So I'm prepared to talk about this with you further later on when you reach that point in the series, because you're going to see it more often from this point forward, I would say. Still speaking of uniforms, he says, I saw a tidbit online recently that Star Trek in the 60s was responsible for the sale of a lot of color TVs for its vibrant use of color, like the tricolor uniforms and the rainbow engines on the Enterprise. An interesting thing I learned was that in real life, the gold uniforms were more of a lime green color, but the cameras processed it as gold, and that simply stuck for the remainder of the series' life. So if you Google this, it actually calls it an avocado green, and that's kind of important because there is a portion of the second season of the original series. And actually, now that I think about it, no, it's in the first season as well. There is a casual captain's uniform, a casual captain's tunic that Kirk wears, and also Pike has now worn it as well in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, that is a green. It is definitely a green captain's tunic for sure. So I guess it's a darker green or a different shade of green than the avocado. But either way, it clearly looked differently and looked more of a green under the lighting that they use. The crazy lighting that they use and the crazy patterns and whatnot for the original series. So I think this is funny. His last sentence about Future Imperfect is, back to the episode, Barash was just desperate for company, pretty sad above all else. Yeah, I mean, there were so many other things in the episode. You didn't talk about the communicator badges. You didn't talk about Picard having a kind of a goatee and kind of a mullet as the Admiral. You didn't talk about Geordi without his visor. You didn't talk about Minuet showing up, and that was what tipped off the whole subterfuge of what was happening. There were a lot of other details, but it was interesting. You focused so much on the uniforms. It's unique, very subjective indeed. But he says, next was Final Mission. You can tell parts of this episode were actually filmed on location in a desert, not on set, he says. It looks great. You can tell it's location shooting from the effect of the solar glare on the camera lens and the natural wind whipping the characters' clothes. The planet they're on is 55 degrees Celsius, which converts to 131 degrees Fahrenheit. I asked AI, he says, how long a human could survive in a desert atmosphere at that temperature, and apparently you could only survive a few hours or a day at the most before suffering heat stroke. It's a good thing they had those mountains within walking distance. Yes, yes, indeed. And I bet somebody actually did that research back then as well for that. He says there were some surprisingly heartfelt moments in the cave between Wesley and Picard. This episode sure made it seem like we'll be getting a break from Wesley for a while. So let's see if he's actually gone and how long he'll stay gone. He's gone. You will see him again, but he's gone. He's no longer on the ship in a regular capacity, and you will not see his name in the credits anymore, like the opening credits. That is it. Going forward, Wesley Crusher is now a cadet at Starfleet Academy, and his arc as a character will head in that particular direction, and he'll return a couple of times before the show is over. But as far as him being a regular cast member, that's done. It's over. He is gone, for sure. So then Alex says, one final thing I wanted to comment on. I know you've said frequently that Season 3 is when the jump in quality happens for this show, but honestly, Season 4 has been knocking it out of the park. Season 3 didn't really have standout episodes like I was expecting, but Season 4 has just been banger after banger. It feels like the last 5 or 6 episodes I've watched have just all been consistently so good. If the rest of the show is going to feel like what Season 4 has felt like up till now, then I'm going to take my time and savor what's to come. Next up is The Lost, Live Long and Prosper, Alex. So here's the thing. We were actually talking about this. Is what William from Sci-Fi Center was talking about, the best of both worlds. And he said that was like the watershed moment of the franchise. And he's not wrong. The reason I say Season 3 is because I also include episodes like Yesterday's Enterprise, Evolution, Captain's Holiday, like Allegiance. Like there are other episodes in Season 3 that I absolutely think do set the tone more than the first 2 seasons do. Deja Q is another one that I would also put in there as well that sets the tone going forward. But I mean, the show gets stronger. I mean, if you were to ask me, like, there's 2 different questions. There's when did the series turn the corner and what's the best season? If you ask me what the best season of the show is, it's not even Season 4, it's 5. For me, personally, subjectively speaking, Season 5 is the best season of the show. It's the one that absolutely, it's the one that I started watching the show in the middle of when it aired, like live, like in the 90s. But I think that it also has some of the strongest episodes of the series, and it's really when the show and the cast and crew really did come into their own, and the show really had its identity solidified at that point. So, yeah, I think Season 5 is the best, by far. But no, I still will stand by Season 3 turning the corner. Who Watches the Watchers is another Season 3 episode that I think is a watershed one. It's all subjective, obviously, right? If you think 4 was really the turning point, and it started with the best of both worlds and went from that point on, hey, that is your business, for sure. I just think that there are other stronger episodes in Season 3 before we get to the best of both worlds that absolutely cement the position that the show was in with respect to its setting and what it was doing. But again, it's all subjective, to each their own. Just so long as you are enjoying what it is that you're watching, Alex, which it seems like you are. And certainly, take your time and savor more of the episode so we can have a greater in-depth discussion about it. Thank you, as always, for the feedback, Alex. It is indeed greatly appreciated. And finally, we'll close things out with Jared Cardos. His email this week is titled Marvel Zombies, Man of Tomorrow, and More. He says, Hey Ray, hope you're doing well. Before I get into your last few episodes, I wanted to share thoughts on a couple of things, starting with the trailer for Marvel's most upcoming animated project, Marvel Zombies. Yes, we talked about this earlier. He says, I'll be honest, between the episode of What If that inspired this being okay, and having never really been into the comics it's inspired by, I wasn't too terribly interested in this. But after seeing this trailer, I'm hyped, he says. First, the trailer itself is just really edited well. I've seen the sentiment and comments that whoever made this needs a raise, especially for the inspired choice to use the J-pop heavy metal hybrid baby metal for the music. Outside of that, it's really cool to see some characters that we haven't seen in a while or we don't know for certain if they'll be in future projects, like Scarlet Witch, Hawkeye, Ms. Marvel, and biggest of all, Blade. I'm pretty sure it's not Ali voicing him, but still we'll take what we can get, especially when he's doing sick moves like slicing a tiny Ant-Man in half and having one of the better sword fights I've seen in a while with Ghost. Definitely looking forward to this coming out in a few short weeks. See, now, Jared right there, we can count on Jared to have, like, the positive attitude with respect to seeing Blade in animated form. Daryl was talking earlier about how there are people upset that this is the first time we're going to see Blade in the MCU is going to be in animation. What the hell ever? Seriously. Jared says he'll take what he can get, and it looks badass. And honestly, I know people will look at what Jared just said, like you'll take what you can get, you'll accept whatever scraps they'll give you. No, that's such entitled bullshit to say that, right? Whatever scraps that they can give us. No, one more time, they put this stuff out for our consumption, and we make the conscious choice whether to consume it or not. They don't owe us shit, and we don't owe them our attention. We choose to give them our attention if it's something that we enjoy. If it's something that we don't enjoy, then we are wasting our own time in that regard. So either way, people just get really entitled with that shit. But Jared is excited to see Blade in animated form, whether it's Mahershala Ali or not. And I'm with him on that. It looks cool. He says one thing from Flight Chat. Someone talked about whether we'll get more Star Trek movies, especially in the Kelvin timeline in the future. That was Amari. He asked me that question. He says, it sounds like with the recent finalization of the Paramount Skydance merger, we might be getting that. There was an article recently that talked about the merger and the new movies planned as a whole, but there was mention of 2 Star Trek movies in the works. One featuring an original cast directed by Toby Haynes, recently known for directing on Andor, as well as a new movie featuring Captain Kirk and crew, both produced, among others, by J.J. Abrams. It doesn't say that the Kirk movie will be Kelvin, but with Abrams producing, there's a decent chance of it being the case if it comes to fruition. So, Jared, I don't know if you heard my response to Amari about that, but I'm going to stand by my thoughts with respect to that. I think that if we see Star Trek movies, I think we're going to see Star Trek movies again, but I don't think they're going to be Kelvin. I just don't see that. Just because Abrams is producing doesn't mean that it's going to involve Chris Pine and Zoe Saldana and Zachary Quinto. And to be honest with you, with the limbo that we've been in with respect to, Star Trek projects that have been teased in the past, right? Like S.J. Clarkson was going to direct one. Noah Hawley, right, from Legion and whatnot, he was going to direct one, and they have not come to fruition. So we're the same place that we've been in for the last number of years as far as Star Wars movie announcements. I'm definitely there with Star Trek movie announcements, and I just don't think that with them merging back together and Viacom and CBS back together so that they have the rights to television, I just don't think they ignore that. I don't think they're going to focus on Kelvin timeline when they invested so much energy and effort and they legally are able to do stuff with the prime timeline now. I think the movies that we're going to see are going to be prime timeline. And this article, let's see, where's this article? You sent the link for it. So it's Deadline, and it's Justin Kroll and Anthony D'Alessandro that was written a couple of weeks ago, back on August 13th, actually almost a month ago, truthfully. And the article itself from Deadline is about, Paramount's priorities afterwards. But I do want to get to this part where it says another high priority for the Skydance on Paramount is Star Trek, with which David Ellison has been involved since the 2013 sequel Star Trek Into Darkness. Dana Goldberg, who is part of the new Paramount studio leadership group, she's one of the co-chairs, her and Josh Greenstein, and they also serve as vice chair of platforms and chair of Paramount Television, respectively. So she is the chair of Paramount Television, right? She says Star Trek is a priority across the company. Now, she's the chair of Star Trek Television, according to this article. And it says, as of right now, Paramount is developing a film in the Star Trek franchise that features brand new characters. It has Andor director Toby Haynes on board to direct, with Seth Grahame-Smith writing and Simon Kinberg and J.J. Abrams producing. The studio has another installment with Captain Kirk, Spock, and the rest of the usual characters returning, with Abrams producing and Steve Yockey writing. But here's the thing. It says nothing about timelines in that regard. And quite frankly, the fact that the first one it says is one that features brand new characters, I mean, that totally sounds like you're doing another adventure in the prime timeline, as far as I'm concerned. And then, as far as another installment with Captain Kirk, Spock, and the rest of usual characters returning, okay, I mean, that seems kind of vague to me, but I don't see them doing anything that ignores the prime timeline, especially when they've literally spent the last 8 years fleshing out more of the prime timeline between Discovery and Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks, even in animated form, Picard. I just don't see them ignoring all of that lore that they've been building for the last 8 years because they've had the rights to do so, just in favor of continuing the Kelvin timeline, right? And I understand that the Kelvin timeline made them money back in the day, but if you're talking about an opportunity to do the same thing but create the synergy, right? Because the Pixamondo stuff and the visual effects that they've done in Discovery and Strange New Worlds and whatnot, I mean, it's been on the same par as far as I'm concerned, cinematically speaking, with the effects and whatnot that we've seen in the Kelvin timeline. So yeah, I'm sticking by my belief that the next Star Trek movies we see won't be Kelvin timeline. Hey, again, it doesn't have to be Kelvin timeline for Abrams to be involved. I know that it seems that way, but again, I'm not even completely convinced that Abrams is going to be involved. That dude's been named to how many projects with Warner Brothers and DC and whatnot, and none of them have come to fruition. Let's just wait and see on that, right? There's a difference between using somebody's name for hype and something actually coming to fruition. And right now, the priority for Star Trek at this point in time is the last couple seasons of Strange New Worlds and Starfleet Academy. Any other projects that come out of that, well, we'll wait and see what David Ellison and the new brain trust at Paramount says, in the next number of months to a year, if you will. So we'll see how that all goes in that regard. I also don't necessarily agree with them waiting till further in the article to bring Star Trek up, because I think it is, objectively speaking, Paramount's biggest IP, right? And definitely one that they need to prioritize, even more than Transformers, Ninja Turtles, and others. As much as people may disagree with me on that, the proof is in the pudding, especially with how old that franchise is, and with the 60th anniversary coming up next year. Just throwing that out there as well. Anyway, Jared says, now on to the biggest news in a minute, and definitely worthy of your latest flight alert, James Gunn's Man of Tomorrow. Very surprising thing to see just announced in the middle of the week. My first assumption after hearing it was that it's going to be a Superman-Lex Luthor team-up movie, sort of like other movies like Thor the Dark World or Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and while that's still possible, I think what's the more interesting option would be a Lex Luthor movie with Superman as the antagonist. I can almost see an inverse of the first Superman movie where Lex breaks out of prison, teams up with some smaller villains. I'm thinking something like Metallo, Livewire, and Parasite to rebuild a new empire to combat Superman. Either way, I'm looking forward to it, and this is precisely why, no disrespect at all to anything that you just said, Jared. This is precisely why I don't speculate. Because that sounds like an awesome idea, and now, if and when it doesn't happen, because Gunn has a different idea and has written a different script, there's going to be a level of disappointment. Not a ton of disappointment from me, and maybe not from you, but from others who think that's a really awesome idea, and now they're going to be hoping that that's what it is, and then when it isn't, they're going to get their hopes dashed. Such is the torture, if you will, the curse of being a fan that is so heavily connected and emotionally connected to this type of material. So, just throwing that out there. It's a great idea, and I think it would be a very intriguing idea, something that we haven't really seen before. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see how that goes. On the comic art Gunn used for the announcement, he says, you mentioned that one of them from artist Jorge Jimenez felt familiar, and I might know what you're thinking about. In the past, you've mentioned that you were picking up all the books during the start of the Rebirth era. Now, one of Jimenez's first big works was on the book Super Sons, about the misadventures of Damian Wayne and John Kent. He's become pretty big at DC since then. He's been fairly consistently on the Batman book since around 2020, in a lot of ways being the Batman artist of this decade, working on Batman runs by James Tynion IV, Chip Zdarsky, and the newest run that started this month by Matt Fraction. So he sent cover art. So I did read Super Sons. I didn't read, let's see. I think I read the first 15 issues of Super Sons. I don't remember if that's where I saw the artwork from. It could have been. It very well could have been, for sure. And then he also sent the Batman image from the Batman stuff that he's been drawing. But Jared says, what's interesting about his art for Man of Tomorrow is that it reminds me of his recent work he's done for the corner boxes on the current Batman and Superman titles. And he sent all of that. And yeah, this is definitely within that same vein for sure. All of this artwork, I mean, it looks gorgeous. I really like the style. It's a very, for lack of a better way to put it, an aggressive style, like more defined edges and contrasts, I guess you could say, right? I don't know, just something about it seems more demonstrative and fiery. And if there's, I'm not great at describing comic art, but that's just how it looks to me, to be honest with you. He says, finally, thoughts on the past couple of episodes of Peacemaker. Episode 2 was a quieter episode, he says, but still really good. Tim Meadows as Flurry is a hilarious addition to the cast. That's his name, Flurry. Even if his scene with Economos maybe goes a little too long past being funny, but the scene with Eagly more than made up for it. The whole sequence with the 11th Street kids partying was sweet until the heart-to-heart between Chris and Harcourt sours it. Yep, which was totally intentional. Episode 3, he says, was even better, with the exploration of this different world. The big revelation was surprisingly at the start of the episode, not only showing that Harcourt had a relationship with Rick Flag Jr., which I have to imagine is a big reason why she's so messed up about her feelings for Peacemaker. But that some version of Flag's relationship with June Moon, the Enchantress from Suicide Squad, is still in place. Not the movie. I said this earlier, Jared, not the movie. It does not confirm the movie, but nevertheless, Jared says, with this new information, I wonder if maybe this other character Flag Sr. is taking out of prison that we've seen in preview footage won't be some of the Suicide Squad survivors like we've been expecting, but the Enchantress, either reprised by Cara Delevingne or by a new actress. I could see both sides wanting to kill Peacemaker. June is revenge for Chris murdering the man she loved, and Enchantress for Chris killing the cheating bastard before she could. I feel like calling in an ancient, all-powerful magical being on Peacemaker is sort of like the hydrogen bomb versus the coughing baby meme brought to life, but maybe Flag Sr. wants to see that explosion? Again, as I said earlier, this doesn't mean the Suicide Squad. It doesn't mean Suicide Squad, rather. The one from 2016 is canon. It does not mean that, Jared. It really doesn't. So if it is Enchantress, I would more than likely believe that it would be another actress. And even if it was Cara Delevingne, it still doesn't make that movie canon. It just means that Cara Delevingne, like June Moon, looks like her in both universes. That's literally all it means, truthfully. And I don't know if, like, you're suggesting, like others, like many others have. I've seen both sides of this. I've now seen people say that it means that Suicide Squad from 2016 is canon, and I've seen people say that, no, this erases it from canon. It means neither in that regard. Like, it doesn't erase canon. It's just establishing that Rick Flag still has a thing with June Moon in the DCU. So what? Not that big of a deal as far as that goes. And I mean, maybe that could be, I mean, that, I don't know. Again, with respect to speculation and guessing, like, I've said my piece on who I want to show up. I want Harley to show up, and, you know, maybe Bloodsport at some point, because he said he wants to bring Bloodsport back. James Gunn said he wants to bring Bloodsport back, and you would think it would be Idris. So, either one of those two, that's who I'm hoping for. Beyond that, whatever. Like, I'm speculating on this. I'm not going to spend the next 5 weeks speculating on who the hell is going to be. I just want to wait and see exactly who it is in that regard, to be honest with you. So that's just my thoughts on it. But he says, as for the rest of the episode, Chris's exploration of this other world was really interesting. You can definitely see why this world would be so immediately so appealing to Chris, with him having the fame, wealth, and love that he's wanted all of his life. However, they're definitely not beating the allegations of this being the racist world yet. Not a drop of melanin in any of the extras we've seen so far. Between that and the sort of Stepford wife dynamic that Harcourt 2 has, Thirst Court, I think it'll be more surprising if this universe doesn't turn out to be a bigoted hellscape. But either way, it looks like everything's about to come down to Chris on his world, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. And that'll be enough for me on this one. He says, looking forward to your future episodes. Thank you, Jared, as always, for the feedback. And yeah, it's like Brandon Davis said, with respect to the casting choices for that world. I'm going to read exactly what he wrote on Threads. Brandon Davis, who was with comicbook.com and does the Phase Hero podcast, he says, at this point, with the theory gaining so much steam, if the alternate dimension isn't a version of Earth X where racist or Nazis won or something otherwise also evil is leading the way, it's going to be an awkward conversation about why all the background actors are white. Yeah, that is going to be an awkward conversation, but I find it, you know, almost impossible to believe that James Gunn didn't do that on purpose, right? And that, like, if maybe we'll see black people, like, in the next episode as the background characters, and that would, you know, then we'll be confused in that regard. But no, if it continues, like, being homogenous in that way and no melanin at all, then yeah, I think it's pretty obvious where that world is headed and the choice that Peacemaker is going to have to logistically make with respect to which universe he's going to exist in going forward. But either way, can't wait to see it. We got 5 more episodes coming up starting this upcoming week. So thank you very much for your feedback, Jared. As always, it is indeed greatly appreciated. And that will do it for this week's episode of Flight Chat. So thank you so much to everybody for all of your emails and for all of your contributions. Thank you to John R., of course, leading things off. Thank you to Daryl for sending in through the Facebook page. Thank you to Wally U. Thank you to Alex. Thank you to Jared for all of your feedback. Just a quick programming note here. Flight Chat next week will be delayed by about, I'd say a day or two. Okay? It may even happen in the middle of the week, truthfully. I'm not going to wait until, I'm not going to do 2 weeks, because, depending on how many people send in emails, that could be a long episode. I don't want to do a really long episode, depending on how many people send in emails. But for now, I will say that Flight Chat will be delayed by a couple of days. It won't necessarily be out on Sunday the 14th. It could be Monday the 15th or Tuesday the 16th, and that has to do with some stuff going on. It's just going to be real busy, really busy week going into the weekend for me for a number of things. It's all good stuff. Seriously, it's all awesome stuff. But yeah, there might be a bit of delay in the schedule with respect to that. Also, I know that recently I've been doing Flight Box episodes, and I've been trying to do them on Thursdays. Well, I can't do them on Thursdays for Peacemaker. And I know that the season finale of Strange New Worlds is coming up, but there's going to be a bit of a break in the action as far as my content in general with respect to episodes after Tuesday's episode of the main show. After Tuesday's episode of the main show, then I'd say give it about a week. Wait until like maybe Monday or Tuesday is when the next anything that I post with respect to a podcast will show up. Just a brief break for some awesome stuff happening. That is all. That is all. Just wanted to give everybody the heads up when you send stuff in or when you don't necessarily see a Flight Chat episode posted on Sunday the 14th. But if you do want to send in emails for the next episode, which probably will be on the 15th or the 16th or at some point after that, you know where to find me on Threads and on Instagram at the Flightcast. You can also comment on the posting for this episode on the Flightcast YouTube channel. There's also the Flightcast Facebook page. I'm on BLUESKY at Flightcast. And of course, I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care. Stay safe out there. Have a great week. And I will see you all next time. Take it easy.